What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Pigskin Profits. It's episode 6 already. Cannot believe we're already about to talk week 5 in WIAA high school football. Nick Sisson here, and special guest tonight, a new prophet to join the panel, Matthew King of your ESN. Matthew does a lot of great work for live streaming events and touching up some articles and occasionally bitching on Twitter about the Mariners, who are in action right now, Matt.
Yeah, I spend a lot of time complaining about the Mariners, and you can't forget I complain about the Packers a lot. Won't be tweeting about the Packers anymore during games because it seemed to work out this last week. But yeah, I'm thrilled to be here, Nick. You guys do a tremendous job, so I'm glad to be a part of this one.
Yeah, I'm glad you can make it. For those who are curious, the best looking version of the Prophets, Tyson McCallum, is unable to join us here tonight, and as well as Devin Record. So we're making it work here. Got Matt, a very knowledgeable high school person. This is the man behind the curtain for the 1A, 2A live stream broadcast through the Eli Sports Network and NFHS Network. So spends a lot of time watching the high school performers in the 1A, 2A category. But, lately, Matt, you've been dabbling all over the place. You've been covering a lot of 3A, 4A, 2B. You've been kind of all over the map up there. Matt's territory is kind of in the Olympia-ish to Tacoma range, and then also dabbling in the EVCO as well. So, I mean, you're the man of many hats just as much as I am.
I've been everywhere. I even got up to Linden in week 2 this year to see them play WF West. So yeah, I'm flying all over the place. I've seen some really good 3A teams. I got to be a part of the broadcast last week. Mount Tahoma knocking off Lincoln in what was an insane game. I've had some really good luck in games this week. So it's been a lot of fun seeing a lot of these great athletes, just trying to get these kids a little bit more coverage, the coverage that they deserve. Of course, in our areas, we're both spoiled, the Daily News, the Chronicle. So there's a ton of fantastic reporters, and I'm just glad to be a part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys do a great job, and looking forward to continuing to peep in on those broadcasts with some good games that you guys have been covering as of late. You mentioned that game right off the bat there, Mount Tahoma and Lincoln. I'd love to get your insight on that game, being that you saw it. But, last week, that was a game that we had broken down and we're trying to figure out, hey, Mount Tahoma's played a lot of quality football teams up to this point. You could say the same for Lincoln as well. They had played a pretty tough schedule. It had an unfortunate, result in the Camas game, of which, player ends up getting injured, game ends up getting called. Fill me in. What, that was the quarterback, yes, who ended up getting hurt in that game?
Yeah, it was their starting quarterback, and luckily they had a Silas transfer, Trey Walker, who's taken over since then. And dude, this guy is incredible. The talent, the composure that he plays with, this team's special. And honestly, I wasn't fortunate enough to see that starting quarterback in that week 1 game, but it's hard to imagine what he looks like if he is like Trey Walker. That team's just loaded with talent. They're a lot of fun to watch. And I mean, the town's starting to really believe in those guys. So the atmosphere at that last game was incredible. And they've got one heck of a running back duo in Bryson Bailey and Felix Diaz. I mean, it's a tough thing to stop them right now.
Yeah, I mean, Mount Tahoma ends up getting the win. Lincoln, drops to 1-3 overall on the season. It was just a season ago that they were in great position to knock off Bellevue and get themselves further deeper into the playoffs. And we didn't really say the word rebuilding year because they have a lot of talent, like you're alluding to, especially young talent overall on the roster. But a couple of stumbles so far out of the gates. Definitely a team that I still feel is in contention. I think Mount Tahoma is actually a little bit above the pay grade on what people have given them credit for. And after the first 4 weeks, I'm buying in to Mount Tahoma a lot more than at least where I was last week. I picked Tahoma to win the game, and it was back and forth there late. And I want to talk about a really good ball game last week. That was a really good one to watch.
Yeah, I mean, Lincoln was an onside kick recovery away from winning that game. They couldn't quite grab onto that onside kick. Sione Cajo, the starting quarterback for Lincoln, he's just a freshman, but man, he looks like he's been doing it. He looks like he could be a senior right now. I mean, he just looks so composed. He's just going to continue to get better. But man, that defensive front of Mount Home, I think, is where they really make their living. It's constant pressure. They got guys who can come from every which way. And head coach Keith Terry has those boys believing in themselves. He has done a tremendous job in turning that Thunderbird program right around. Felix Diaz came up with a big play defensively last week. He was the transfer from Curtis, I believe, coming over. Man, he looks really solid. Just so many guys on that defense making plays. DJ Irvin came up with some big plays. A blocked PAT kept the T-Birds. And I mean, it's just one guy after another coming out with plays. You're never really calling the same guy's name in back-to-back games. It's something special brewing there.
Yeah, I really look forward to seeing how the direction for both of these teams really splits off, towards the end of the year. I wouldn't be shocked to see that if these teams played, 10 times in a year, Matt, an entire schedule, that you might walk away 5-5.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're 100% dead on. I mean, two great coaches, two great offense. Again, Lincoln's just so young. Losing a guy like Jabari Johnson, you can't just replace that in 1 year. I mean, he's a one-of-a-kind talent, but Cajo, he's on that trajectory for sure. I think if you gave them I think you nailed it. 10 games against each other. I think they really do go 5-5. I don't think that's insane thing to say. Lincoln's got a good foundation. They know how to win. Those players have been there. It's just, sometimes you just catch those bad breaks, and that's what it really came down to against Mount Tahomey. I could have seen that ball game going the other way. They're really close, and I think, Lincoln, you can't write them off quite yet.
Well, more to come with Mount Tahoma here later on down the road for sure. Again, a battle-tested team, played, North Kitsap extremely tough in the season opener this year, and Lincoln again playing a tough schedule. I think that they're in pretty good position to still, battle for around that second place spot in the league. And who knows? I mean, they could have an outside chance of still finishing first in the league. We still don't really quite, in my opinion, I don't still know what to make about Stadium. There's still a team that's got a sexy record at this point, 4 games in. Spanaway Lake still in the conversation there. So, a lot lakes, a lot of things to work out in that league ultimately to see where it ends up shaping up. I wanted to move a little bit further up the road here into the 4A real quick. A game of the week that we had last week. I mean, man, we went back and forth on this one. Emerald Ridge and Curtis. I mean, ultimately it just came down to, two really solid quarterbacks. And, we were really like at the point where we're flipping a coin here. It's like, do we want to go Skockle or do you want to go, Rocco Koch? And so far, Koch has proven to be the front runner in my eyes as the most valuable player in the South Puget Sound League. I think that he's just shouldering more of a load overall than, let's say, Davion Super-Alice of Graham Kapowson. Super-Alice may end up having the better team and the better record when it's all said and done. We don't know that yet, but Rocco Koch has made a strong play already for maybe even 4A player of the year. Matt Curtis ends up getting that win. It wasn't a game that defense was optional either. Curtis came up with more stops as well. And, the big thing with me is I know Emerald Ridge can score, but can they come up with enough stops throughout the course of a game against a really good quarterback? And as of right now in the season with fair conditions out there, I would say that I'd be a little bit concerned on that side of the ball if I was ER.
Yeah, I mean, they lost Logan Leisherness from last year's team. He was kind of the captain on the defense. That's a pretty big loss. He's at the UW now. He wasn't just their starting running back. He was that captain on defense. I got to watch them against Graham Kapowson last year call that game. And when you get into a shootout, you're putting so much pressure on your defense. It could just take one stop, which is, I mean, haven't seen anyone be able to stop Curtis really yet this season. So that's a big ask in itself. But I think the Vikings might have a sleeping giant at defense. I think that defense is going to eventually click. I think Curtis will end up right there in the Final Four at the 4A level. Emerald Ridge could join them though. Honestly, the SPSL 4A could have 3 teams in that Final Four. There is so much talent in that league right now. Skockle has taken a big step though. He can improve in the blink of an eye. Yeah, ER's defense, they've got some work to do, but they've got plenty of time, and they're always going to play that high-level competition. So it might just take one really strong outing. Someone's going to have to step up as the leader on that defense with Leisherness gone, and that's what's been the kind of eyesore for me when it comes to Emerald Ridge is they're missing that leader on defense. Someone's going to eventually fill it up, though, I have no doubt.
Yeah, I mean, anything can happen in the course of a football game, especially when we move into October, November. I mean, we've already seen the weather become not so favorable, and just like the flip of a light switch here. And um, that's always one area that I look in, at least that I've mentioned over the last couple of years, is that teams that are physical, that can run the ball and do a good job of protecting the ball and play defense, usually win the match, so to speak, of the day. And I like where Emerald Ridge is at with the ability to throw the ball when necessary and when needed. But ultimately, for me, this game tells me that they're going to maybe have some problems coming up with stops at necessary times, and also have that running back to lean on, like you mentioned, with Lisherness not there. So there's a lot going on.
Yeah, I mean, got to give a lot of credit to Curtis as well. That's a tough team to stop right now. Rocco Koch is insane. He's a spark plug. Let me tell you, I got to watch him play in some basketball games last year for Curtis. Didn't start with that just insanely talented team, but when he got in the game, man, it wasn't just the team that got fired up, the entire crowd. He's very loved in that community. That team rallies around him. So they've got something special going right now with Rocco Koch leading that offense, and it just makes me wonder if Felix Diaz was still on that team. That'd be a dangerous 1-2 punch in the backfield as well. So they look near unstoppable if they don't already.
There's a lot of games, honestly, from last week that we could talk about and touch on. I'm going to skip down to 2A here real quick. Again, game of the week for last week. You had a chance to see Linden in person this year. And if you have been watching any of our episodes previously, you would know that I am not 100% certain on Linden this year. And it has nothing to do with them not being a great football program or even a great team. I think it has more to do, in my mind, with how good the competition in that league is around them. And last week, Cedro Woolley had them on the ropes, up by a touchdown, a chance to salt the game away, ends up slipping through the hands of a wide receiver, and then Linden ends up taking a punt, driving 2 minutes, 20 seconds or so, and quick strike offense, and they end up scoring. Instead of going for the tie, they go for 2 in the win on the road, and they end up beating Cedro Woolley 29-28. I mean, Cedro was the team that I thought was ready to take the ascension and eclipse them, and they had everything working for them playing at home. It's probably not going to get much better than what they've got at quarterback with Carson Reynolds. To see Linden answer the bell, though, down a couple players in that game, they lost a wideout, they lost a lineman, and to be able to come up with that gutsy championship medal effort. Seems like that when me and you get together, we're always talking about Linden and championship medal. Man, I mean, I don't know where to go with this one. I mean, we're going to talk about the games that each one of those two teams is playing later on in the show, but man, I wonder what kind of an effect that this result is going to have on both teams. What would be your thoughts on that?
I think Linden had a little bit of a wake-up call week 1 when they lost to Ferndale, and now it's going to be, hey, you guys see, it's not just those bigger teams. Teams in our own classification, teams in our own league can take a shot at us. Linden's going to have to kind of refocus in. There was a ton of hype behind the Lions coming into this season, as there should be. Defending state champs, Brant Hepner coming in at quarterback. The dude looks like, I always say, he looks like he's created in a lab to play quarterback for that team. He is insane. I got to watch him, and they just clicked right along against WF West. Cedro Woolley came out and hit him in the mouth, and they really didn't know how to respond. I mean, they ended up digging deep. I believe they scored the last 8 points with no time on the clock, if I remember seeing that right. The Lions, they're going to be all right. I think this says more about Cedro Woolley than it does Linden. They're ready to take that next step, and I think they really did. I mean, they were, again, one play away from knocking off the back-to-back defending state champions. That's pretty impressive.
It's a dogfight in that Northwest Conference now, going for 2 playoff spots. I mean, when you really think about it, and if you actually go back and read what was written about the gamer in, I think it's Whatcom Preps that did it, the Linden head coach said something very telling, that, he believes that Cedro Woolley is probably going to match up with them at some point down the road. Man, like, I don't know, man. I think they are like toe to toe right there with Linden, right? But I'm gonna jump ahead right now. Okay, we're not gonna pick the game. But Cedro is playing Anacortes this week, right?
Yeah.
And it does not get any easier at all for Cedro Woolley. If they drop this game right after just barely coming up short, one defensive stop away from knocking off the two-time defending state champions and kind of being in that driver's seat with this matchup coming up with Linden, now all of a sudden you're in desperation mode here. And only two of these three teams are going to get a bid. It's one of them is going to be on the outside looking in. I'm not saying that what the head coach is saying is incorrect, but it's so hard to tell at this point in the season. There's so much more football that needs to be played, and we're not even like really talking about Seaholm here. They in my estimation, I think Seaholm just put up a real stinker against Cedro Woolley. I think they're a lot more talented than what they showed in that game. So you got to be careful in the Northwest Conference. Anything can happen. I mean, right now, Cedro's playing for their lives. They are backed up against the wall, taking on the Seahawks this week. I'm really interested to see how they respond.
Yeah, this is a monster game for not only Cedro Woolley, but Anacortes as well. You want to kind of have Anacortes lay down that law and say, no, we're not just a flash in the pan. We're here to stay atop this conference. They're going to be coming out looking to send a message here. So Anacortes has a lot to play for. I think they're coming in with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. But Coach Van Dalen, Blake Van Dalen for Linden, when he says something, I kind of take it like, all right, this guy knows a little bit of something about football. So I think Cedro Woolley is going to come out, and I think they got to just flush last week. I think last week you can almost twist it to be a win for Cedro Woolley. I don't know if the players really look at it as a win. They want to go in and they want to knock off Linden. So the Cubs coming out, that place gets rocking at home in Cedro Woolley. They're a little spoiler. They flashing back. They were the last team I ever played in high school. They blew us out on their way to winning a state championship. So I played on Cedro Woolley's field. That place is bopping every single snap of every single game. Anacortes, though, man, watching them last year, how could you not fall in love with their story? How could you not just have that little bit of like, yeah, I want to see these guys do well. And they did. They had a really, really strong season. But again, I think this is going to come down to Anacortes wants to prove they're not a flash in the pan. I think they're coming out. They've been having this game circled. How ridiculous is it that only two of these teams do get into the playoffs? I think
super
it's
ridiculous.
Insane.
I mean, yeah, super
that
ridiculous.
League's just loaded with talent. It is insane the amount of talent they have. Linden's clearly still the team to beat, but I think Cedro Woolley is real close. I think Cedro Woolley is a team no one wants to see in the playoffs. So I think a lot of these 2A teams are going to be pulling for Anacortes this week. But then again, you're going to have to play Anacortes. So good luck. Good luck playing any of these teams this week. That's going to be a fun matchup to watch.
Matt, depending on how the bracket shakes down, let's just say hypothetically that the EVCO and the Greater St. Helens League rules applied to the Northwest Conference. Let's say their top four took on the top four from somebody else, and then those four teams that won end up going to the state tournament. You could very well possibly make a case that all four of them could potentially make it to the semifinals if they're in opposite sides of the bracket, if it didn't work out that way. Albeit, I do think Highline is a very, very, very good team. I also think Tumwater is a very, very, very good team. So, but this season more than ever, I think that the Northwest Conference is so stacked that it's their state championship is almost like college football. You know what I mean? Like where you lose a game and it's so magnified, it's so blown out, like you're not going to have a chance to get to the college football playoff. Lucky for Cedro Woolley that they got a redemption shot this week taking on Anacortes. But then if Linden keeps doing the trajectory where they're at right now, Matt, you could feasibly have Linden and Anacortes coming down to the last playoff spot later on down the road, or a three-team tie for first place, all three of them with one loss, depending on how the Seaholm equation works into. But it's a story that I have my pulse on, and I'm really interested to see how that turns out as well. So let's dabble around again for last week. You mentioned Ferndale, I should say, with that game against Linden. I mean, you want to talk about, an impressive win. Everybody was just like, Linden's going to roll. Ferndale's lost a bunch of guys. The Hatchets are playing offensive line for UW. Great choice, by the way, guys. And now Ferndale ends up going last week, taking on Arlington on the road. And I'll admit it, Matt. I mean, I really overlooked Arlington going into this matchup, and they just absolutely blew the doors off of Ferndale. It's like, how serious are we going to be taking Arlington at this point? We know the 3A class is loaded, but are they like this year's version of, let's say, Lincoln, or this year's version of, say, Stanwood, where they're you could almost pencil them into a quarterfinal, and maybe depending on how the matchups go, could find themselves in a semifinal.
Arlington is really good, and you're not alone. I overlooked them 100% too, and we all made a mistake. We all have to put our hands up. I think most of the state did, putting up 46 points against Ferndale, who looked dang good against Linden back in week 1. That is very, very impressive. I mean, their lowest point total this season is 42. That is absurd with the schedule that they've played. I mean, it's just nonstop. They come at you from start to finish. I think it's really time to start putting a lot of respect on Arlington's name. I think pencil them in for a quarterfinal would be a safe bet. I think they might even be a team that no one wants to really see play in the semifinals. If you're a Yelm, if you're an Eastside Catholic O'Day, they're a team that can be sneaky. So you got to watch out for Arlington right now. There's no more sleeping on them. If you're still sleeping on them, you're a fool, and they're going to make you pay for it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of teams in 3A that are kind of in that you're sleeping on them, section. In my eyes, I still don't know what I'm really getting out of Monroe. I do believe that they're a good team, and I think that they got the respect of the voters, and they also got Tyson's respect, and they've got their opponent's respect to this point. They got a game coming up this week that we'll preview a little bit. But they're kind of in the same grouping to me in terms of where Arlington is at this point with the schedules and what they've played. I would say Arlington has done more and impressed me a lot more. We could probably count on one hand, Matt, over the last, let's say, decade, how many times that, Ferndale has really had their pants pulled down on them. It's very few. Last year, Glacier Peak kind of took it to them at Looming Field in the showcase game. I can't remember if that was another week 4 matchup or potentially a week 3 matchup, but either way, it was somewhere in the same vicinity of the season.
Week 3, I think.
Yeah, it's so weird to see Ferndale on the other end of the stick. They're normally the ones putting up 46 and allowing 14. So very eye-opening. Looking forward to any update on that Mariners game, by the way?
Oh, they're down 4-1. Jordan did more Jordan Alvarez things, but they got runners on first and second with nobody out. So, yeah, if you guys see me looking down, I'm looking at the Mariners game. I got it on my phone. I'm a massive Mariners fan, so tonight's kind of an important game. So obviously, so far they're laying an
egg. Excuse me. Comment coming in. Justin Demashwitz, he wants to know that he missed start. No Tyson today. Yeah, no, Tyson is entertaining the folks. So hopefully that's all going well for you, Tyson. We miss you. Absolutely. We are still going to talk about Tyson's rankings. And now that he's not here, we might, talk a little bit not so kind. No, I'm just kidding. We'll still take it easy on you. But, and then the comment so far of the night, sexy record. You'll find out a little bit more about sexy record and really what that means. I'm sure you already know what it means, though, Justin. Couple more games from last week that I wanted to mention. Speaking of Justin, he is a part of a cool podcast called The Scrimmage. If you haven't had a chance to check that one out, do so. I think it's Grays Harbor. I'm bad with counties. I'm pretty sure that's where it's at there, but Aberdeen area, right? We're gonna shift to Aberdeen, Matt. Yeah,
you got it. You got it.
So last week, right? Tough game to call because Prosser and Aberdeen get together, and the year before when we were previewing it, it was really tough to gauge how serious of a threat Aberdeen was to a Prosser going on the road to centralish Eastern Washington and taking on a really quality team, quality program. And Aberdeen just ended up getting absolutely blown out in that game. They were missing their best player, the running backs, Sawyer. And, I think the week before he had gotten ejected and had to serve a 1-game suspension. So some things weren't really clicking for Aberdeen last year, if I remember. This season, they get to return the favor against Prosser, and they do so at home. And a lot of people including Justin, would call this a major upset, 27-25 over Prosser. I think more than anything else, it kind of just solidifies that we really don't know a whole lot about some of these teams by the time that they, get to about week 4. You're still kind of in last year mode, if you know what I mean, right? I think that Aberdeen has really proven that they are going to be a contender when it comes time to making the postseason. As of right now, Matt, I've got them slated at the number 3 seed from Evco by the time the season ends, and they would be looking at a road matchup against the number 2. But in my estimation, that feels like a winnable game this year because you don't know what you're going to get out of the Greater St. Helens League this year. It is bonkers top to bottom.
Yeah, I mean, I looked at the GSHL and I'm like, oh, wow, Washougal lost to Woodland, and then Woodland I lost to, I believe, Columbia River last week or the week before. So, I mean, yeah, they're just beating up on each other. Evco 2A is very fascinating. We always hear, I feel like, in this area, Aberdeen, this is their year, and then they end up just dropping one, and all of a sudden things kind of go downhill. Injuries kind of hurt them a little bit. This year, hey, they made a statement. They said, hey, this is the year. This is the year where you have to take us seriously. They're going to play close games no matter who they're going to play. So don't worry about it. I mean, the week before, they beat Centralia 28-6. Guess what? Centralia is better than they have been. They're still not quite there, but it's Aberdeen style of football. They're going to play close games regardless. I still don't think you can sleep on Rochester. Rochester is sneaky, sneaky good. Don't sleep on the Warriors. I think they could end up stealing the number 3. I wouldn't put it out of the realm of possibility. They steal the number 2. It's going to be a real big battle. I think the Bobcats have a gauntlet of a schedule there towards the end of the season. Tumwater, Rochester, and WF West, 3 in a row. Luckily, they get 2 at home. I think that's where you're going to learn a lot more about Aberdeen after that Tumwater game. I think Tumwater beats them, but once you see them play Rochester, if they can go out there and take care of business against Rochester, GSHL better watch out because they do play very good defense. You can never count them out of a game. Their brand of football is just smash mouth. They're going to run it at you. You better find a way to stop it, and it's going to be low scoring, just brawls.
Yeah, I mean, some information from Justin that was sent over on X. I mean, Aiden Watkins, we had him on a few weeks ago. Matt did an interview with him live after he had the Al Bundy performance of the week, scoring 4 touchdowns in a single game. 60 rushing yards, 1 touchdown, 77 receiving yards, and a receiving touchdown. A little bit of a Swiss Army knife. The quarterback, Grady Springer, efficient, 8 for 10, 176 yards, 1 tutty, and then 31 yards rushing for a tutty as well. So a couple guys doing a few things. Huge momentum play in the first quarter on a blocked punt by Paul Balthazar, recovered by Nolan Cook for a touchdown. And, both of those players are linemen. Honestly, in my estimation, Matt, I mean, winning at the line of scrimmage, offensive and defensive, is more important than, the horses that are in the stable, so to speak. If you got guys that can, smash it up and muck it up down there and can do all the dirty work, I mean, it's going to make things a lot easier for the Springers and the Watkins of the world, And Aberdeen, a couple years ago, I felt took a pretty good team into Ridgefield when Ridgefield was undefeated at the time. And, Wyatt Bartroff was just an all-world linebacker the last couple years for Ridgefield. I mean, he had probably the biggest impact that I have seen a single player have in a game over the last couple of years. And Aberdeen ended up getting shut out there. And then last season, some changes, different style of offense. But this is the Aberdeen that I grew up knowing, as a smash mouth program, a team that is going to be tough to beat, especially on the road. They've won a lot of games recently at home. I'm not going to say that it's far-fetched, Matt, because I don't want to bring you down here, right? Because you're a WF West guy. We'll get to that later. But I mean, if Aberdeen is able to take care of its business at home this season, I can't remember if they have WF West at home or away, but I mean, I think that they're within striking range of the Bearcats, and that's no shot at the Bearcats. I just, things have not really kind of clicked for them yet. This week's game coming up with Tumwater gives them an opportunity to kind of click, but man, I mean, at the expense of what? Tumwater is just absolutely beating everybody. But I think Aberdeen really has a shot there. And Rochester, I mean, again, another rebuild situation. after having Talon Betts graduate, I mean, obviously that's going to be a tough guy to replace. And, they've done a pretty good job themselves, but I trust your judgment being that you cover that team and you cover those area, that area more than I do and stuff. I've just seen them from afar on the NFHS and occasionally a playoff matchup here and there.
Yeah, no, WF West, I thought was going to have more of a trouble beating Black Hills last week, and they looked really, really good. They also looked really good against Shelton, more so in the second half. Aberdeen does play Tumwater and WF West at home, I believe. I believe there's a game in between that's against Rochester on the road. That fight for second place is more interesting than it's been in a long time. You got Rochester, you got WF West, and you have Aberdeen, obviously. I think those three teams are going to be competing for that second place spot. I think all three of them do end up getting into the playoffs. I think, unfortunately, Shelton, Black Hills, and Centralia are going to be on the outside looking in when it comes to this season. But yeah, you want that home playoff game. You want that 2 seed. You want to face that GSHL 3 team. Although I think those leagues are very, very even right now. But I think WF West is going to get better as the season goes on. Gage Brumfield, the guy's just a super athlete. You can only keep him contained for so long. They're still learning what they want to do on offense too. So I still don't think we've seen the best WF West team yet. And I will say,
I agree.
I did go to WF West. My head coach is not even the coach there anymore. So Bob Woolen retired. So I'm not quite as tied in with WF West as I have been in the past, but they're getting better. I still say that their biggest loss was on the defensive line. Gavin Fugate, yeah, he's a stud, but Daniel Matagi and William Buzzard, oh my goodness. You don't get two of those guys on that defensive line like that too often. Aberdeen is still just a smash mouth style team. So I think it's going to change week by week what we see from Aberdeen. They could go out there and they could blow out WF West. They could be in a dogfight with WF West. There's just still so much mystery about those three teams. I think we're going to learn a lot about the Bearcats this week, like you said, against Tumwater. And I think we've learned a lot about Aberdeen with that win over Prosser. That was a marquee win for the Bobcats.
Let's move on a little bit here. I want to kind of go back up to the top of the ladder in 2A with, Tumwater is kind of 1 in my mind. If you were going to say 1A or 1B, however you want to, classify it, Enumclaw is that team. And, they had a great year last season. They've come out and built on it already this year and played some good teams along the way too. That matchup that they had against Peninsula, I mean, that's a tough matchup. Peninsula is actually, a really competitive team in 3A. So they get a chance to take on Ording and they go on the road. And I didn't really have a lot of confidence in the Cardinals heading into this game because I think it's just such a big leap from being, I think, 1-8 last year, to beating a team that was arguably the number 1 seed last year that ended up getting the number 2 spot, I believe. So Enumclaw ends up winning that one 37-7. And, the Hornets just continue to do it in a variety of ways, but the main thing that I've noticed from Enumclaw is that their defense has been super solid over the last season and a half. I mean, the Cardinals were able to run the football very successfully, and they got some young guys still, and they're going to be a good team. Maybe still this season and have a really good chance of sneaking into the postseason and getting a crossover matchup. I'm pretty sure that there's 4 crossover matches or 3 guaranteed crossover matches out of that league. And then there's also the potential for some at-large stuff going on there to where they still could do enough in my eyes. But with Enumclaw, I don't know yet. I mean, if I'm really comfortable of saying that they're the number 1 team, I think that they have a really good resume. And if you stack them up with Tumwater, though, side by side, I would take Tumwater right now in a matchup against them. I think that they are just playing way outside of their world right now. And, they were a team that was fairly young last year in key areas. They had a senior quarterback in Overbay, but now with Kastner at the helm and, a lot of their guys in the trenches, were sophomores and juniors last year. And that last year's season is really paying off dividends for them. But Enumclaw, I think that they're still clear-cut going to win the league and, get the number 1 seed. And I think they're in great position to get some favorable matchups early on. I'm not really sure though what to make about how they would stack up against the other top teams in the league. Like if you, not just Tumwater, if you put them up against Linden, if you put them up against Anacortes, if you put them up against Cedar Woolley, I mean, I think that all of those teams that you mentioned, you're probably leaning in the other direction. What about you?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think it comes down to the SPSL 2A is very top heavy, while like the Northwest Conference is very deep. I think they have, again, like we already talked about, 4 teams who could really make a legitimate case to grab one of those semifinal spots. I overlooked Enum. I picked them to win the state championship last year at the 2A level. I might have been
Yeah.
just a year early. They look really, really solid this year. But again, I think we learn more about them in the playoffs than we do the regular season. This was a very, very strong win for them. Beating Peninsula was a solid win. No one's going to just go in and blow out the Seahawks. They're a very talented team. I'm still waiting for that eye-opening game for Enumclaw. Was this it? Maybe. But again, I just don't know what we're seeing from those other SPSL 2A teams. I wouldn't want to play Enumclaw because of that mystery if I'm one of those top tier teams. But yeah, I'm putting Tumwater still above them. I think Linden's still above them, even Cedro Woolley. So there's just too much mystery going on. And them and North Kitsap, I think, are very even to me. I think there's a lot of what exactly are they right now in terms of those two teams. I think we'll learn more once you get to those crossover games and through the first round of the playoffs. But again, they'll already be seeded there. So all you can do is take care of business if you're Enumclaw, get that good seed, and open some eyes at that point in the season.
Yeah, I mean, North Kitsap still has dangerous guys too, Matt. I mean,
Yeah.
with Edwards and Logan Sloman, they have the ability to put up points with just about anybody. You go back and you look at the matchup against Tumwater, and on paper that looks like a kind of a mismatch, being that it was on the road in Poolsbo. I don't know if people should look at that game and say, "Wow, maybe North Kitsap's not that good this year." I think it's more so that Tumwater is really good. And I think that North Kitsap still is going to be one of those teams that's realistically in the hunt for, getting back to at least the semifinal round. I mean, there's not too many programs that have really been consistent over the last couple of years, but North Kitsap is one of them. And I think that they play in a favorable league. We'll find out a lot about them this week, because they're taking on a team that nobody knows anything about, including myself. Yeah, I don't even think anybody really knows where they came from. Is it just like, did Bainbridge Island just all of a sudden show up one day? Like, I heard you have to take a ferry. I don't know. Is that true? Yeah. They're going to take on Bainbridge this week in North Kitsap, and we'll find out a little bit about them. But yeah, I mean, if you stack those two teams up against one another, I would have a really hard time picking against North Kitsap in that game. I think I would, but I don't want to find out right now. I like where everything is heading in the right direction. I think that there's a perfect storm of matchups in 2A that are really, really sexy, to think about and dream about. I mean, we haven't even gotten to the teams that, like Highline, for instance. I already mentioned them a little while ago. I mean, you want to talk about a team that's like super, super lurky. They are just lurking right now, man. I mean, they almost beat Kennedy already this year. They really waxed Rainier Beach in week 1. They're going to play a schedule that's not going to blow the doors off of the computer rankings anywhere or the RPI, but they're just going to keep doing what they do every single week, Matt. I'm telling you, man, they're coming for the smoke. And I'll be really interested to see who they end up matching up with, because they'll be there. I have no doubt in my mind. So I wanted to trot down a little bit. Royal against Linden Christian last week. The year prior, Linden Christian takes the trip across the state that nobody wants to make, and they go and play the Royal Knights, who had won 37 or 38 straight games at that point. And, Linden Christian gets a phenomenal effort from Kate Eldridge and company and Jeremiah Wright. And, last week I picked Royal to return the favor, and they did. And, it was a really, really tight ball game, but also both teams having some issues with turnovers. Royal was able to get over the hump at halftime and protect the football. Meanwhile, Linden Christian just couldn't seem to quit stubbing their toe at home in that game. They ended up losing it 28-7. It's one of those games to where you need to find out where Royal stands, I think, against everybody else, because the Northwest Conference has just always been the barometer for competition, whether it's 1A or whether it's 2A. Last year with Mount Baker, last year with Nooksack Valley, last year with Linden Christian, one of those teams is out on stupid playoff tiebreaker rules. Now this year, only one of those teams gets in, and Linden Christian is sitting here with 2 losses. And bro, it does not get any easier. I mean, this week coming up, they take on Napavine at home, and you may be saying at home, what, Napavine, that 2B school? Like, yeah, that 2B school is coming to be recognized by everybody when they when they go take on LC this week. And I'm almost worried, so because I picked LC to win the state championship out of 1A this year, because I figured that their tough schedule was going to harden them for the tough game that they had against Nooksack Valley. And I have a hard time at this point feeling really good about my pick. I mean, help me get off the ledge here and tell me that Linden Christian is going to be okay.
Well, man, I picked Linden Christian to win the state championship too. I texted you my picks just so I could be held accountable for those. They're in some serious trouble right now. They really are. Mount Baker took a step backwards, so that is at least a positive. But man, Nooksack Valley looks pretty good, but Nooksack Valley also dropped one to Kings. Where did Kings come from, by the way? Don't sleep on the Knights right now. They are rolling. But Linden Christian, you just got to, I guess, trust the process. I don't mean to steal anything from Philly. You got to trust it. They've been there. They know what they're doing. Royal is not a bad loss. Royal will never be a bad loss. I personally don't see myself ever picking against Royal in anything ever again. I picked against them to win the state championship this year. That was a mistake. I think they're rolling right along. Linden Christian will be okay. They will. I mean, when you have a program like that, there's going to be some bumps along the way, but you're going to get right back on track. Napavine this week, I talked to Coach Fay, and he said this was his worst nightmare, is playing Linden Christian coming off of a loss. It's not going to be fun. You saw Linden coming off a loss. Linden Christian is going to be the exact same. If there's one game that you can watch this week, man, it's hard to put anything past O'Day and Eastside Catholic, but that Napavine Linden Christian game should be right at the top of your list. And it's a Saturday game, so you'll be able to watch both. That game is going to be absolute bonkers. Let's calm down and let's look at things after this week for Linden Christian, see how they handle Napavine.
Yeah, tough competition for LC so far this year. Not surprised at all that Royal was able to go and win that game on the road and return the favor from last year. They're a team that loses once every leap year. They're the leap year team. So I'm a firm believer, though, like I said, in teams that face adversity throughout the year. You know, if you just look to Mount Baker a season ago, the schedule that they played, taking on La Center, taking on Nooksack Valley, taking on Linden Christian, and then finding themselves in a 3-way tie. They end up winning the tiebreaker. They end up getting all the way to the state championship as a 10 seed, so you can lose a couple games overall in the middle of the year and it's not going to kill you, and I think that they're going to be better off for it. Man, whoo.
You good? You gonna make it?
I got a frog in my throat. I was at my son's soccer game before this, and they dominated. By the way, yeah, 7-1.
Of course they did. Of course they did.
Yeah, so I was just busy shouting instructions to him, But yeah. Anyway, I digress. That was a big game from last week to take a look at, and so that's the recap of Royal and Linden Christian. Royal 28-7, remaining number 1 in every bracket in everybody's heart. Let's see here. I am just kind of going up and down the list here. I mean, I already mentioned Bainbridge. They were on the radar last week on a road game against Olympic. Just absolutely demolished Olympic. I think it was 45-3. Auntie M is here to give us the lowdown that Bainbridge Ferry has an espresso stand, an ATM, and sells sushi. So get your pregame appetizers on the ferry. That's That's high class. That's high society, Matt. That's worth a Benjamin right there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's worth a mention. Espresso stand and sushi. That's a weird combination. I feel like you're going to have to choose one or the other. I'm not a big sushi guy, so give me the coffee every single time. But that's definitely notable. Always notable where there's an espresso stand.
Let's do a little rapid fire here. We won't spend a whole lot of time here, but just kind of rattle off some stuff. The Battle of Bothell last week, the actual team named Bothell beat North Creek 36-14 on the road, convincing fashion, avenging the only loss in program history to North Creek. Bothell looks fairly good. Their only loss to Skyview on the road, 21-7. Kingco 4A just absolutely loaded, just like SPSL 4A is loaded, Matt. So keep an eye on Bothell there. We might talk about him in a little bit. Sumner beats Puyallup 35-30, but at what cost? Sumner ends up losing Matthew Spurbeck in the ball game, and you don't ever want to say that an injury is something that your team can rally around. Same thing with like the Lincoln situation, but I mean, ultimately Sumner, a well-coached, well-disciplined program. I'm sure that they're going to try to embrace the next man up mentality, but no rest for the wicked. They got a tough matchup coming up here against Graham Kapowsin this week, and tough competition every week when it's SPSL 4A. I mean, Puyallup has been a program for the last couple of years that's achieved a lot. So Sumner getting the victory, getting to 500 at 2-2 is big for them. But like I said, at what cost? Any thoughts on those games at all?
Yeah, I see a lot of SPSL football. Sumner, we're going to talk about them here in a little bit, so I won't dive too far into them, but they've definitely got some issues, and that's a devastating injury to Spurbeck right now. I mean, that Sumner you got to have offense in the SPSL right now. South Kitsap is a team that actually came out and gave Curtis a little bit of issue early. Olympia gave GK some issues. So yeah, that league is just absolutely loaded from top to bottom with a ton of talent. You can't overlook anyone any single week. And whoever comes out of that SPSL as the league champs, they earned it. It's hard to imagine anyone coming through all the way undefeated, but everything's kind of shaping up like that GK Curtis game here in a couple weeks. That one has game of the year written all over it. So the SPSL 4A is definitely a fun one to watch for sure right now.
Yeah, I can't wait for that one down the road. But, because it's so good, 1-5, it's not shocking to think that somebody could get bumped off along the way. You know what I mean? So it's going to be interesting to see if somebody like a Sumner or if somebody, even like a Puyallup, for instance, at 1-3. I mean, Puyallup might be the most dangerous 1-3 team in the state. So
no kidding.
Yeah, I mean, you got to take everything seriously in that league. More rapid fire, Chiawana at Richland, battle of 4A teams in the Mid-Columbia Conference, and Chiawana passes the test, slows down the Bombers' offense there. And, Chiawana, they were the last remaining undefeated team last season. And, as of right now, their opening, game loss to Kamiakin doesn't look too terrible. The MCC always has a ton of good teams, whether they're 3A or whether they're 4A here. But a good win for the River Hawks. Still probably the worst mascot name in the history of mascot names. But no offense,
hater.
Yeah,
a River Hawk hater?
No, I mean, come on, be honest. What the hell's a River Hawk? That's like a Seahawk, man. Like, you're a Packer fan. I know you hate the Seahawk.
I don't hate the Seahawk. I honestly don't. I think it's much cooler than what it could be, which is the Seagulls. So I'm going to give Seahawk the benefit of the doubt. I hate Seahawk fans more than I actually hate the team, Nick. So give me a break there.
We're going to take it personal here.
I'm sorry, guys. It's too easy.
Yeah, you're good. Hey, man, I don't know. Who's won a Super Bowl most recently? How'd that one NFC Championship game go in 2014?
Man. That go pretty good? A shot right to the heart. It's all right. It's all
more
right.
MCC stuff. Kennewick ends up passing the test. The team that beat Chiawana Kamiakin, in the Battle of Kennewick, and it's the actual Kennewick Lions. Called that one, by the way. That was like one of the only wins that I had last week. But, I mean, Kennewick just continues to show that, they are a tough defensive team. And, last year they picked up a couple of wins in playoff competition and, getting the win at Kamiakin. I think that's a a definite big win and step in the right direction. I would personally have Kennewick in the top 5. I haven't had a chance to reveal Tyson's rankings here on the show, which we will do a little bit later, but a good road test victory against Kamiakin.
Yeah, I picked Kennewick to win the state title, Nick. I sent you that in the text. I was hoping for a little bit more of a response than I got there, a little bit more of a surprise. So I like the Lions a lot, and I think that win was massive for them last week, kind of give them a spotlight a little bit. I think, of course, they've got another big one coming up this week. The Lions, you can't overlook them anymore. I doubt they come through that MCC unscathed. If they win this week, that obviously changes everything. That Lions team is coming in. They're wanting to send a message. I mean, that team's so talented in every facet. Jamie Counts is normally our heart over there. She's the one who gives us that information. She was high on the Kennewick Lions once again this year. She was high on Chiawana last year, so she obviously knows what she's talking about. I'm buying what she's selling, and right now Kennewick looks to be just as strong as advertised.
Yeah, just the official selections here for Matt. A quick reminder, 1B state champion, Mossy Rock, 2B, Napavine, 1A, Linden Christian, 2A, Linden. Yeah, that's original. 3A, Kennewick, 4A, Graham Kapowson. I like, all of those selections, honestly. I think that, with Kennewick, honestly, it's about attrition. Can you survive the regular season to give yourself a good enough resume and a good enough seed to where you're at least, let's say, safe to get to the semifinal round? Because that's really where the matchups are going to play out for Kennewick. Not to say that they can't beat who they would face, but a short list for me, Matt, would be they're going to be looking at taking on Eastside Catholic, O'Day, Bellevue, any of the Yelm. I mean, I feel like that Yelm has been forgotten ever since they barely beat Camas in week 1. Like, nobody remembers that Yelm went undefeated and won the state championship last year. I mean, they've got to be the least worrisome, talked about defending state champion in the history of 3A competition. So, hey, I mean, what do I know, right? But I think
3A is a gauntlet.
I think if Kennewick ends up surviving and puts together the resume that they need to end up getting, an undefeated record and then getting some favorable matchups, I think they're in a pretty good position, and at that point, when you get there, Matt, anything can happen. It doesn't matter who you're up against.
Exactly.
You've proven that you're one of the better teams in the classification. And so then just go out and play the football game and let the results be the results. Justin's saying our Linden Christian pick to win the state championship is not looking good. But, hey, I guarantee everybody was said that the Mount Baker pick to make it to the state championship last year wasn't looking good at the time that it happened. So, I mean, I reserve the right to still be positive and be optimistic about that.
He's also saying it looks like he thinks Montesano is a very good team at 1A. But that 3A gauntlet, we talked about it a little bit last year here at ESN. You had last year Lincoln, Yelm, Bellevue, Eastside Catholic. There are so many teams that you could have seen playing for the state title. It's just the same this year. 3A is so deep every single season, and it's a gauntlet. Whoever wins the 3A state title, they earn it every single time.
Moving on. Freeman and Lakeside 9 Mile Falls. Lakeside 9 Mile Falls ends up getting the win 26-14. But the Freeman Scotties have been a tough out, no matter who they play over the last couple of seasons. Lakeside continues to, impress, and they remain undefeated. So close game there ultimately. And that was on the road for Freeman. I mean, at Lakeside 9 Mile Falls, and Lakeside already with that 7-point win over LC earlier this year. I still feel that Lakeside is very much in the conversation for getting a chance to, maybe take on a Royal, maybe take on, a Nooksack Valley or an LC. Only one of them is going to end up making it. Kings, you mentioned Kings. I like Kings. I think that Kings has proven that they are going to be a problem for just about anybody. It doesn't matter who they match up with and where they match up at. They were ever so close last year on the road against Nooksack Valley, losing by 2. And ironically, they turned around and then they beat Nooksack Valley by 2 this year. So, those two teams played super even. But Lakeside remains undefeated. Seton Catholic. Another 1A school. I mean, not a lot of people really know anything about Seton Catholic. They are about a half hour down the road here from me in Kelso on I-5, and they still have a perfect record 4-0. And man, I tell you what, the WIAA computer RPI rankings, man, they absolutely love Seton Catholic. Number one, baby.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, man. They beat Stevenson, right? I mean, that's like a floating 1A 2B school. So I don't know what the computer really loves about Seton in terms of being a number one. Sorry, Kellen, if you're watching, but ultimately, I think that Seton Catholic's only real like test and real barometer coming for them is La Center, and I don't want to suggest that even a Castle Rock could end up being a team that competes with them on the gridiron. But in years past, it certainly would have been. Castle Rock's been a pretty solid program over the last few years. They're having a tough go of it now with their best player injured in Steven Ibsen. But man, I tell you what, number one overall, yeah. I mean, if everyone was wondering who that team from Seton Catholic is, that's who the team is, and they're not like awful by any stretch. They've scored points. But like Justin's saying in the live stream comment section, I think that they're going to start to come down to earth a little bit when they start, playing the tougher schedule.
I wish RPI didn't get released until mid-October. I don't look at it until then, so I couldn't have even told you that Seton Catholic was number one. I'm sorry. I know if that makes me not the best journalist, my apologies. But yeah, Seton Catholic, they're a fun story for sure. La Center's another level. You talked about them. They've been playing these teams that they should take care of business against in Seton Catholic, and they have, and they've looked really good doing it. But once you take that next step, you find out, as a Ric Flair says, to be the man, you got to beat the man. Well, you're going to be playing the man now. You're going to be playing the man, and it's gut check time for Seton Catholic. And maybe the RPI knows something we don't, but I'd be surprised if they knocked off La Center. But hey, crazier things have happened. You got to play the game. You play the game for a reason. So we'll learn a lot one way or another with that one.
Yeah, I mean, a game that wasn't on our pick'ems last week, but La Center taking on Cannell, and Cannell got obliterated last year by La Center on the road, and then they have the home matchup this time around, and they make it a little bit more respectable. It was 28-28 at one point in that game before La Center got their shit together and ended up scoring the last two touchdowns of the game and ended up winning it. I feel La Center is very much still the favorite out of Trico 1A, and I think that they will more than likely beat Seton Catholic in the head-to-head matchup this year. But we should still make dinner reservations for two on this one, Matt, because we really don't quite, in my estimation, know how good Seton Catholic is. Because when I look up and down the teams that they've played and the teams that they've beaten, Stevenson was 3-0 last week. Good story, great for that program to end up starting the season with 3 wins and no losses, but ultimately not in the upper echelon of competition in the 1A, 2B floating range. So we'll see. Another team in that area, one very well. I don't know about the other one, but first I'll start with the one I think very well. Raymond South Bend at ADMA, and Raymond South Bend with Farrell Johnson. I mean, they are just absolutely running roughshod on everybody. That matchup that they had week 1 against Toledo, I don't know what's more indicative here. Is Toledo really good, or did Raymond South Bend just let one slip away? I think we're going to find out a little bit more about both coming up this week, but talk to me a little bit about Raymond South Bend and Farrell Johnson.
I love Raymond South Bend. I really do. I think highly of them. I think week 1 was more about Toledo kind of feeling a little disrespected coming in to this season. So I'm still high on Raymond South Bend. That win last week over Adna, I was extremely high on Adna coming into last season. I tried to take a shot and talk to Matt Evans about that, and Matt Evans said we'll see, and Matt Evans was right. So Matt Evans knows what he's talking about. Big shout out to Matt there. I absolutely love him, love his rankings. I'm still very high on Raymond South Bend. They're going to be just fine. Can't count out Austin Snodgrass and Farrell Johnson, that 1-2 punch, and then they got a really good defensive front every single season. that team's going to be fine. Again, I think that week 1 was more indicative of, I know you hate the mascot, but the Toledo Riverhawks, they kind of woke a lot of people up. You mentioned there's games this week for both Toledo and Raymond South Bend. I'm lucky enough to be doing Raymond South Bend hosting Forks. I think we're also going to learn a lot about Forks this week in that matchup, while Toledo takes on Alaska, or as Jordan Nailing calls it, Gritville. So there's going to be a little bit of clearance coming up in the 2B classification in just those 2 games alone and throughout the next few weeks, because even Kalama, I think, is getting a little bit overlooked. But RSB's offense is insane. They're going to be just fine.
Yeah. Another note from Justin from the game last week in that 62-36 victory that Raymond South Bend had against Adna. Austin Snodgrass with 137 yards and 3 touchdowns. He also passed for 97 yards and 2 touchdowns, 10 tackles on defense, and an INT return to the house. I mean, you want to talk about a stat sheet that got filled up, Matt. I mean, Mr. Snodgrass did some serious work. Yeah, there's Justin down there in the comment section here. Justin, you're going to be the top commenter because nobody else seems to want to do it. Riverhawks is a super lame mascot. I thought it was so bad when Chihuahua adopted it first. Toledo was forced to change their name from the Indians to the Riverhawks, and I'm going to start a political, correct war here. I mean, what's wrong with Indians? I mean, come on. I get it, but I guess, whatever. I mean, they only branded a baseball team for 100 freaking years after it. But yeah, Toledo always has and always will be the Indians in this neck of the woods here. But yeah, we get it, culturally appropriate and stuff. But yeah, Riverhawks, they couldn't have come up with a worse name. I mean, what about just Hawks? Just plain Hawks.
I've called Toledo the Indians on air because I grew up with the Toledo Indians being the talk of the town, just so good at everything. So I've slipped up a little bit, but yeah, it's not my favorite nickname, but I guess I missed the boat on how disliked it is. I missed that one. I know the fans in Toledo wish that they didn't have to change. I will say that much.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Just check out Scappoose, Oregon. I don't know if you've heard of Scappoose, Oregon. It's where Derek Anderson played at. They are still the Scappoose Indians because the Scappoose tribe was like, you're absolutely not taking this away from us. They want everything to do with the name and the moniker and everything that goes with it. The Chiefs logo, like the Kansas City Chiefs, that's what they've had, and I mean, you're going to get, I guess, a little bit of pushback. I was thinking that if the Toledo was going to change their name to something that was a little bit more, I guess, today politically correct, I would have thought they would have went with just Warriors or something like that, to kind of keep the same, same mindset at least there, I mean, it's not like they're calling them, something super derogatory here, but Riverhawks is just stupid. I'm sorry. I mean, good luck to the Riverhawks, appreciate you. Thanks for playing. But yeah, I'm just not a huge fan of it. But
they're playing against one of my favorite mascots. Sorry, I just want to finish up the mascot.
Good.
The Loggers.
My
the Loggers
is a fantastic.
Yeah. Sorry. The Loggers is a fantastic nickname. I just got to show them.
Oh yeah. Love. Coach Barker for RA Long, man, he gave me a list of some of the best names that were available in terms of mascots. Like he coached at Quincy, right? Like the Jackrabbits or something like that. Love the Jackrabbits. And then the Richland Bombers. Oh gosh, you want to talk about an awesome name? The Bombers. Yes, absolutely. All about the Bombers. Honestly, I mean, I kind of like Thunderbirds too. Like any team that rocks the Thunderbirds, Mount Tahoma, Tumwater, super sexy names. I mean, it just strikes fear in your heart. I'm a big fan of like sidebar conversations when we talk about like mythical mascot battles. Like I did this a couple years ago when like the Hudson's Bay Eagles and Tumwater Thunderbirds were playing in the district championship for girls basketball. I'm like, who'd win between a mythical bird and then like America's bird here? It's like you got a bald eagle in one side of the corner, and then you got the Thunderbird that probably shoots lightning out of its beak or something crazy, So I mean, hard to judge how that would go, but I just wanted to close out. Forks, you mentioned, absolutely obliterated Ilwaco last week, and Ilwaco had kind of started to creep their way into the bottom half of the top 10 rankings. I knew better. Like I watched a lot of film leading into that pick, and ultimately what I saw was Forks was just a little bit better in most every area across the field. But I don't think that means that Ilwaco is like a bad team. I still think Ilwaco is in that top 16, top 15 in 2B. And I think 2B, if it wasn't for Napamine and Okanagan, I mean, it would be a pretty deep class, honestly, if you think about it. But yeah, Forks coming up against RSB. That's going to be a big matchup and super telling about both teams.
Yeah, I'm super excited to be on the call for that one. I've started my prep a little bit for that one. I do want to say Forks, if it wasn't for COVID-19, that of course shut down the world, they would have won the state title in 2020. There's no doubt in my mind. I watched that team, and that defensive line was absolutely bonkers. They load up, they're tough, they're physical. If you let them get their rushing attack going, you're in for a long, long day, because that defensive line is going to come at you from start to finish. It's going to be very interesting to see how they play against Raymond South Bend's 1-2 pop on offense with Snodgrass and Johnson. I can't wait for that one. This was a game I had my choice of some other games. I could have gone and done Timberline and Gig Harbor, but man, this 2B game is just calling my name. I love 2B football, and to have two hard-nosed physical teams beating each other. I don't know if anyone's seen Raymond South Bend's new football field that they put in just a couple years ago. It's absolutely gorgeous, and that town's loving it. So I'm glad to see them having some success. This is going to be a fantastic matchup.
Another game that we had talked about last week with a couple teams off the beaten path, but Sultan and Sammamish, man, that turned out to be a really good game. And I'm going to talk about an athlete here for Sammamish that we mentioned last week. Webster is the last name. Oh my gosh, man, he is like averaging 220 yards on the ground per contest. Yeah, just absolutely like Bo Jackson Tecmo Bowl style, you know. So one last game that I really wanted to touch on was Hudson's Bay at Ridgefield. And I got to be honest with you, Matt, if you watched the show last week at all, if you didn't, you know, shame on you, no offense. I know you didn't, though, because you didn't give me any shit for what I said about your take on Washington's win against Michigan State, on how it's not a great win. It's like, what are they supposed to do? They scheduled them like 3 years ago when they were good. It's like, it's not our fault. It's like,
I don't put it.
715 like yards of offense. That's like a season's worth for some teams.
I don't blame you, Dub. I just think Michigan State is absolutely terrible. It's not the Huskies' fault that they scheduled this so long ago. I mean, I just watched Maryland rip apart Michigan State too, and Maryland's not a bad team, but they're not. I think the Huskies, if you made me rank the top teams in the Pac-12 right now, I'd put the Huskies number one. So I don't want to hear. I just want some more respect on my Cougs. My Cougs have looked pretty good this season, and I feel like they're still under the radar. They beat a couple of ranked teams, albeit in Pullman. Cam Ward needs some respect on his name as well. The Pac-12 is a gauntlet, though. So, yes, you got me. I didn't watch last week's show. I won't miss another one, I promise.
It's okay. I mean, I mentioned you specifically in the show at the end, and I was like, man, this is like one of the all-time worst Cougar-hating takes of all time. It's like, and the Cougars won, too. It's like, you know, sitting here, they beat Oregon State. It's like, what do we have to kill on the Huskies for? I mean, all they did was just like, you know, go and take care of business. And then, you know, for anybody who stayed up past, 3:30 a.m. in the morning East Coast time to see Washington demolish Cal, I mean, it was 14-0 before, Penix even took the field. Yeah. So, I mean, you know, I know we're sidebarring a little college here, but man, I mean, a lot to talk about. I mean, you're right, man. We could do a completely different show on, you know, just the Pac-12 this season. I mean, we won't do it beyond this season because it'll be the Pac-2, but still, shot at Washington State. I think Washington State should be in the Big Ten. I don't really think that it's fair what's being done to Washington State. Again, we could sidebar this maybe later after the show, but I want you to know that on record that I think it's an atrocity that Washington State and Washington and Oregon State are going in separate directions and possibly not even coming to the conference. Like, I don't understand what the Big 10, Big 18 is even trying to accomplish here.
I had the honor of talking to the legendary voice of the Washington Huskies, Bob Rondo, about all this before this season started, and he felt the same way. So I know a lot of people in the Husky community wish Wazoo was going with them to the Big Ten, or even getting into the Big 12 would be good, but to just have this team having no home right now, and I mean, I know the women's soccer and volleyball doesn't get as much love when it comes to this sort of stuff. Wazoo's ranked in all three big fall sports right now. They're ranked number 6 in volleyball. So this isn't just a football school. They deserve to find a home. They playing really, really well. Albeit they still have the gauntlet of, they still got Oregon and Washington coming up. I think they win one of those games. I don't know which one. The Pac-12, it's a lot of fun, but the Huskies, they terrify me. I'm worried about playing them. I will say that. I have a lot of respect for that football team right now. They're really, really good.
I think it's more Kellen DeBoer than anything else. Kellen DeBoer has won at every stop that he's been at. You know, I think that the Huskies' biggest fear going forward is possibly missing out on him to a bigger school that wants to come and try to pluck him from you. I mean, Alabama already tried to take the offensive coordinator, Ryan Grubb. So, I mean, thank God he turned him down. You know, I'm sure Nick Saban was not happy about being turned down, but still at the end of the day, yeah, I mean, you know, I think that the move was really like, it came down to the crew team, you know, because like all those Big Ten schools, they've got like all the, you know, lakes, you know, Superior, Erie, Minnetonka. Just kidding. But still, the crew team needed the challenge. I mean, too many national championships for the UW crew team, and you know, you need some teams that know how to do Lake Michigan, Superior, and all that other shit. So,
I don't mean to interrupt, Nick, but we do have benches clearing in the Astros Mariners game right now. So,
did it take place where the dog? Down. Did it take place where the dog took a shit pre-game?
No, third base side. I believe that was first base side where we had the big dump instead of the big dumper.
Yeah, I tell you what, you got to hand it to both of those teams' scouting departments, Matt, to know exactly where the bomb was dropped, to fight on the opposite side of the field. Right. Expert, just absolute expert scouting departments by both. We know the Astros have an expert scouting department. I mean, hell, it won them a World Series, for instance, you know, so Ridgefield and Hudson's Bay was the last game I wanted to talk about from last week, and then we can kind of get into some player performances and talk a little bit about some rankings, and then close out the show with some this coming week games. So, I mean, we're kind of going on here, but Hudson's Bay, in case you didn't know, they're undefeated, Matt. They're the last remaining undefeated team in the Greater St. Helens League, and if you would have told me that, or given me that option between Washougal and the Field before the season started, I would have taken Washougal, but it's Mark Oliveira's squad, the Hudson's Bay Eagles, who ended up going into Ridgefield, and actually, you know, almost led this one wire to wire. You know, Ridgefield ends up driving late with about 2 minutes left in the game. They kick the go-ahead field goal to go on top 24-21, and then Hudson's Bay takes the ensuing kickoff to the house to break the backs of the Spudders, and they do enough on defense to end up getting the win. Matt, I got to tell you, I've seen Hudson's Bay play in person, live streamed a game with them against R.A. Long, and R.A. Long held them down to 20 points total in the game and only lost by, 12 overall. Technically, they won the second half 8-7 if you're counting at home, which some people in this area are. I didn't know what to make of Hudson's Bay after that game. It's like they were 3-0, but they had beaten Heritage and then R.A. Long, and the other team is slipping my mind at the moment here. But, man, like going to Ridgefield, a team that you probably saw week 1 against WF West, I don't know. I don't know what to make of this. Is it a clunker for Ridgefield, or is it really that, Hudson's Bay has kind of arrived on the scene? And we're going to pick Hudson's Bay game coming up this week. I got some inside information for you on that one. But, what are your thoughts about both those teams? I know you saw Ridgefield and then, Hudson's Bay getting the win here, but I'm interested to see what this means for Mark Oliveira's crew.
Yeah, it's time to put some more respect on Hudson's Bay's football team. I'm right there with you. I thought Washougal was going to run through that league really without hitting too many speed bumps. I thought coming out of week 1, all of a sudden I'm like, all right, Ridgefield, they're going to be a speed bump. But for Hudson's Bay to come out and just they look like the most impressive team in the GSHL right now. And you look at you talked about the EVCO. You want to look at the gauntlet that is the GSHL right now. Throw in, you still got Woodland, Columbia River still right there. Of course, the Spudders, as well as Hudson's Bay and Washougal. And then Mark Morris, I still don't think they've played their best football yet this season. So, I mean, that is a gauntlet. The 4 teams coming out of there are going to be very well battle tested. It's going to be a ton of fun to watch. But I'm right there with you. I didn't see Hudson's Bay coming at all this season. Maybe you could have convinced me next season was going to be their year, but for them to be playing as well as they are right now, the GSHL, what we already thought was going to be a crazy year, is even crazier than we could have ever predicted. So I'm excited. I need to catch a Hudson's Bay game now. I've watched the replays of some of theirs, but I need to actually watch one live or go and see one in person. They look real good.
Oh, you would really like it, Matt. I mean, they got a lot of I formation, big offensive line, big lead fullback to get in there and bust up the hole. You know, they got 2 really quality running backs in Raphael and Akil Bauman. So, yeah, my kid's going crazy in the hallway right now. Sorry if you can hear that. If everyone can hear
good.
that, you know, the joys of being a parent. I'll continue to stop 1 second here. So. All right. I just want everybody to know that I asked very kindly and politely. I mean, they did win their soccer match 7-1. So, but yeah, this Yeti microphone, man, picks up everything. So, this momentary break in the action was brought to you by ESN and N2 Media, providing live stream services across the state of Washington. Yeah, you should totally check out Hudson's Bay game on NFHS if they've got one available. You know, big matchup coming up this week against Mark Morris, and that one's down at Kiggins Bowl. So I think it's VPN, right? That the Vancouver Public Network or something like that. The student ran one. They helped out up at they helped out at the 3A basketball tournament, but they usually do a broadcast of some kind from Kiggins Bowl for a few of the Vancouver schools. So maybe you might be able to catch that one on a live stream there. But anyway, that's last week's game. Jake Moe says Vancouver schools in the live stream comment section. Thank you, Jake. Yeah.
Also got to plug Vancouver Schools helped us with a couple of locations for state football championships last year. They were with me at Mount Tahoma, and then they're also in Puyallup. Tremendous job. Nick is the guy who runs the show there. He is absolutely awesome, and I think we're going to be working with them again at Husky Stadium this year, so it's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait for that.
You mean me or somebody else?
Someone else. Hey, who knows? Who knows? You might hear Nick Sisson on a state championship football call. It wouldn't surprise me one bit.
Yeah, who knows means no thanks. We never thought about you.
Hey, don't give me that. Don't give me that, Mr. Sisson.
Yeah, you know, you do know that we have one on the way right now. So it's like we gotta talk about, we got a sidebar about that, you know, because it's like I was saying that babies do like Civil War time, you know, so mid-January, end of January, kind of in that time frame. We might have to bring the new edition over to Yak Vegas and introduce him to the Palm Springs of Washington early.
This is me formally inviting you back to Yak Vegas this year to call some more state championship games. And I promise we're going to get you on a play-by-play for a state title game this year. Luke, of course, will hopefully be back there. But yeah, it's an all-star crew. I loved it last year. I can't wait to get back this year. And Nick, I'm hoping you'll be able to join us again.
Yeah. Coach Jeff Weeks, awesome insight. I love
man, he's the best.
Jeff and I had the Egg McMuffin 4th and 6th place game with North Kitsap and Tumwater that went to triple OT, that emptied the bag of throat lozenges. Like, and Jeff and I are just going back and forth like, well, what the hell do they do now? I mean, you got to guard Brewer. It's like, you know, all right, I'm going to go ahead and spout off some nonsense here known as super good performances from last week, although it's really not nonsense. It's very valuable. I'll come up with a little stopping point here, Matt, and see if we can and bring you in. First of all, do you have anything that you want to mention for players or performances that maybe I might or might not say already?
Look, there's one that doesn't jump off the page to you at all. It doesn't look, I believe the word you used is sexy earlier. It doesn't jump off like that. But in the game I did, of course, Mount Tahoma and Lincoln, Elijah Durr, again, nothing that's going to blow your mind. He had a big interception that kept Lincoln out of the end zone, would have made it a 2-possession game. And then when they got down by 8 with Lincoln kicking the PAT, he came up with a blocked PAT. So it's little things like that. Some players make those big time plays, kept it just a 1-score game, gave the Thunderbirds a chance. He deserves a shout out. He played really, really well, made some big time plays that normally just get overlooked in the grand scheme of things. So Elijah Durr definitely deserves a shout out there.
Excellent stuff, Matt. Thank you for that. That gentleman, Mr. Durr, was not on my list. When you say Durr, I can't help but think of Tom Dwan. If you know who Tom Dwan is, you're definitely on my favorite list. Do you know who that is?
No. I have no
Poker
idea
player.
what you're talking about.
Poker
Oh,
player.
poker
His,
player.
his nickname is Durr.
Oh, okay. Okay. I like it. When I looked at it, I did have to take a double take. It's just Durr. So I'm like, that's the only way it's got to be pronounced. Durr. I loved it. He did play a heck of a game, and I feel like guys that are making team plays, especially on special teams, deserve a shout out like that when it changes the entire outcome of the game.
Oh, 100%. All right, I'm going to rip into these here real quick. Take a long drag of David Brown of Lake Stevens football. You know, Lake Stevens took on West Lynn, powerhouse defending champion from the state of Oregon that we really don't like to talk about very much. But, good game for Mr. Brown, 6 catches, 101 yards, and 3 touchdowns. And on defense, he also had 2 interceptions. Lake Stevens ended up taking their first loss of the season. Better result this time around, though, against Westland than it was last year on the road. Down here in the Greater St. Helens League 4A, from Camas, Trenton Swanson caught 9 balls for 156 yards and a touchdown and a win over my alma mater, the Kelso Highlanders. And back up in the SPSL, we already talked about him. Rocco Koch with 6 touchdowns and then 3 of them on the ground and 3 through the air. I mean, you want to talk about just an absolute balanced machine that Koch has been so far this year. And, a big contributor for Curtis as well in that game, Parker Maddie. He ends up totaling 246 all-purpose yards, returned a punt for a touchdown that went 75 yards, and he averaged nearly 17 yards per carry, going per catch, 10 catches, 168 yards, and 2 touchdowns through the air. So those are a couple big performances out of the 4A ranks. Matt, any comment?
No, Rocco Koch is absolutely taking the world by storm right now. Everything he does is just everything he touches turns to gold right now. And again, sensational player to watch. I've gotten to chat with him a couple of times. A really great kid as well. Paul Beatty has talked with him too. Just an all-around great kid. Very, very intelligent. So to see him absolutely thriving right now is great to see. John Manley did a phenomenal story of the News Tribune. If you haven't read it, go check it out. Really, really cool stuff. You're going to have a new level of love for Rocco Koch. I'm glad to see him finding success.
So let's move down the ranks a little bit. And when I mean down the ranks, Matt, I don't really mean down the ranks, just to the lower classification.
Right.
The 3A class. For O'Day, the Irish, Jason Brown Jr., I mean, he has been an absolute machine as well this year for O'Day, and he's just making it look super easy against Seattle Prep. Goes for 339 yards and 4 touchdowns in the win over Seattle Prep. Jason Brown Jr., I mean, this guy is going to land for a program hopefully not named the Ducks in the near future. So big problem for everybody in the 3A class is Mr. Brown. A couple of Browns already here on the list, and we're not even barely through it. I want to go back to Arlington real quick. Leighton Martin of Arlington in that win against Ferndale, 14 of 20 for 264 and 4 touchdown passes to help lead Arlington to a 4-0 start. I just had those couple performances down for the 3A class. I mentioned him already this year, or this year. We have mentioned him this year, but also earlier on this show, recent memory. Ty Webster from Sammamish, 318 yards on 34 carries, 4 touchdowns. And, he's gone over 200 yards already 3 times this season. Him and Jason Brown Jr. are just absolute monsters at the running back position. More 2A top performers. Raphael Bauman of Hudson's Bay. He ended up having 72 yards rushing and a touchdown, but he had that 86-yard kickoff return for a touchdown. That helped seal the deal in the win over Ridgefield. And then the game that I called, Holden B of Washougal against Mark Morris, 11 of 14, 293 yards, 4 touchdowns, and then he ran for 2 touchdowns, Matt. And on both of them, he wasn't touched, literally. A 23-yarder and a 43-yarder. One of them a designed option keeper, the other one a 3rd and 10 scramble drill. I'm not saying that he is Jake Locker, but he reminds me a little bit of Jake Locker. I don't know if that's too far back of a reference for you to have seen, but I saw Jake play in high school and he was phenomenal. So, any comment on those performances at all for those?
First of all, I'm insulted that you thought Jake Locker was too far back. My high school football coach was Bob Woolen, and he'd pull up old film of not only Locker, but we'd watch Kellen Moore from high school as well. So he has seen it, been there, done that, seen a lot of stars. But yeah, Holden B is a stud. I mean, he's just the latest B to go through Washougal and just dominate at whatever sport he chooses to play. Looks really good at quarterback again this season. So I expect big stat lines for him to come week after week. He's a superstar. And I wanted to tip my toe back in to Jason Brown Jr. I feel like you could just have a 15-minute segment just on him every single week. The dude is a superstar. He looks to be the next big thing to come out of Washington State at the college level right now. You got Emeka Egbuka playing at Ohio State. I think you're going to see Brown get to that level too at the collegiate
definitely.
level.
Yeah, he'd look good in purple and gold, but we'll see. I hear Oregon's making a good push for him. Yeah. I got a couple more here for 2A. Back in that Linden Cedar Woolley game, Brady Elsner of Linden, a wide receiver, 11 catches, 85 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So really big performance stepping up there by Elsner in that win. For Columbia River, we talked a little bit about Columbia River knocking off Woodland. I didn't see that one coming at all. The week prior, Columbia River got beat 21-3. And in that game, Ethan Long got the start in place of an injured Braden Schiffer. And, the Monarchs really gave him a lot of trouble and mixed some things up in coverage. But this last week against Woodland, Long goes 12 of 17 for 288 yards and 3 touchdowns. So a very good bounce back performance by that young man of Columbia River. We mentioned it earlier already for Mr. Aiden Watkins of Aberdeen, the performance that he had, as well as the quarterback, Mr. Springer. And let's just see what else we got. In 1A, Montesano's Gabe Bodwell, 193 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns in a 35-7 win over Castle Rock on Thursday Night Football. Also for Elma, Isaac McGaffey rushed for a touchdown, passed for a touchdown, had a pick 6 in a 27-6 win over Columbia White Salmon. More 1A top performers from Eatonville, Kai Nation had 205 yards receiving on just 4 catches. And he had touchdowns of 95, 54, and 38 in a win over Bellevue. That is super impressive. Fear the Deer. You've heard of that before, right, Matt? Deer Park
absolutely.
Football. Brock Berger, 9 receptions for 207 and 4 touchdowns, including a game-winning touchdown in a win against OMAC. And then finally, Houston Coyle of Le Center, junior quarterback pass for 149 yards and a touchdown. He also had 3 rushing touchdowns and a kickoff return for a touchdown, plus an interception on defense in the win against Cannell. What do you like about those performances?
I mean, 1A is just loaded with so much talent this year. Last year, I thought it was the most wide open state championship, and you're seeing again guys from each and every school at that 1A level getting the job done. I've heard a lot about Bodwell. Have not gotten to see him play in person from Montesano. All my friends from out in that area have been saying, "Hey, you got to check this kid out one way or another." So I guess I really do have to take a peek. I'm been swarmed, but things are kind of quieting down a little bit. You've invited me on the podcast a couple of times. I had to turn it down due to some things going on in life. But yeah, I'm now am going to have a much better opportunity to take a peek at some of these studs, especially in the Grays Harbor County area.
Yeah, I mean, Grace Harbor well represented every week on the show. Justin dropping some knowledge earlier before I got to McGaffey there on his performance. And, we got another comment about McGaffey as well, and plus Bodwell. But yeah, I mean, guy for Elma in McGaffey is just a sophomore, and expect big things according to Justin there in the comment section. And then I have a feeling that this is probably a relative here, so no bias. But Bodwell's been a machine for Montesano, consistently 100 yards, 2 to 3 tutties a game, and dominance on the D line, main cog for the Montesano team. Montesano has definitely got everyone's attention thus far. The AP likes them right there in the top 6-ish, top 5-ish, and realistically, and with the fact that you're looking at only one team from the Northwest Conference getting a bid, I think that things could line up fairly well for Montesano. Just as the season progresses, the most important thing is availability. The most important ability is availability. Remember that one, Matt?
My favorite quote I've ever heard. I absolutely love that one.
Your best ability is availability. So just stay healthy and keep grinding. And I think that Montesano is in super favorable position. They kind of remind me of Kennewick, and they kind of remind me of Le Center. Oh, AP says Montesano is number 3. The reason why I compare it to those teams, not a relative says William. I love it. That's great. Reason I compare them to those teams, though, I get sidebarred real quick here, is that they have paths to getting good seeds. They have paths to having a good resume, so having an opportunity to go undefeated in your league, take on a 4 seed or take on a 3 seed from another league and get yourself in that top 4, top 3, it gives you that chance to realistically, play your games at home and make a deep run. So I think that, teams like Montesano, teams like Le Center, teams like Kennewick, I think that they've realistically got, really good chances. Tumwater's also in that boat. As long as they survive their schedule, they're going to look great and for the committee. Yeah. So, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked to see if Tumwater gets a number 1 seed overall heading into the 2A tournament there. So, just to close it out, I mentioned earlier, but I just want to remind everybody again. But Austin Snodgrass of Raymond South Bend, 137 yards, 3 touchdowns, 97 yards passing with 2 touchdowns, 10 tackles on defense, interception return for a touchdown. Those are big numbers coming out of the Grays Harbor area, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, you got some big time studs out there just making waves. No pun intended, being out by the harbor. That wasn't on purpose. I took the I got on the Austin Snodgrass train last year when I went over and saw them play against Adna, and they just dominated. Austin Snodgrass is a stud in the make, or already a stud. I shouldn't even say stud in the making. He is there. He's one of the elite quarterbacks at the 2B level. And I mean, you can throw a dart at a Napavine roster, and you're going to hit someone who you could talk about with a breakout performance. I mean, it seems almost unfair. It seems like an all-star team just thrown together on that Napavine roster. So, two Bs are going to be very fun. Yeah.
Yeah, with Democrats at quarterback, Democrats, excuse me. Yeah, they're super loaded. I mean, 2B's got some really good talent up and down. I mean, you commented on the highlight video that Aiden Brown sent me. Man, you want to talk about electric, man. I mean, he's a guy that can dunk at like 5'9". I mean, super good measurables in the weight room already. He looks like an absolute problem and just a junior. So class of 25, Aiden Brown of Kalama. Yeah, looking super good. All right, that's all the top performances that I've got for last week. And I figured that since we're on 2B right now, I'm just going to roll it here on the bottom of the screen here. And Tyson McCallum, one of my co-hosts, he's the founder of the Recruit Radar Pacific Northwest personal rankings. And, I think, honestly, even though Tyson's not here, I have no problem saying that I think he does a tremendous job in ranking teams as well. And, from a human standpoint, and, it's not like an AP system here. Like me and Devin, we don't cast votes or tell him where, he should put teams. He usually just drops this on Twitter, and, we'll message back and forth a little bit before the show starts. But we like to keep it as raw as possible so we can have like real conversations in person without getting too much information out over the phone. But we always like to pick his brain on what he's thinking, and if we don't agree, we have no problem telling him. But it's so easy in 2B to come up with number 1 and number 2 with Napavine and Okanagan. I mean, they haven't moved from the preseason. Lynn Ritzville has slowly worked their way up to 3 a few weeks ago, and they stay right there. Toledo, at number 4. Northwest Christian of Colbert at number 5. I think we really like that collectively. And then you got Raymond South Bend at 6, Kalama at 7. Kalama with a non-sexy record, but a really good team. Riverview at 8. Manson at 9 moves up a spot from number 10 last week. And then Forks in the Road, it takes on the number 10 spot there in 2B. Matt, I'll let you jump in here and just comment away on what you see in Tyson's 2B top 10 rankings, and if there's anybody that you think is misranked or not ranked at all.
No, I like the teams that are ranked. I've heard a lot about Lind, Ritzville, Sprague. I believe they're now Washtucknut, Harrington. I think that's all the letters. I might have missed one somewhere. I really have liked what I've heard about Northwest Christian and seen from Northwest Christian. I think they could be a team that ends up sneaking into a state championship game. I really do. I think they're that good. Also, Forks is either going to drop out of these rankings or they're going to get a big bump up over Raymond against Raymond South Bend this week. So I think they're a team to watch on the rise. You hit the nail right on the head. Napavine and Okanagan, they almost have to be 1-2 until someone beats them. Also, Riverview, a sneaky team coming in. I believe they were at 8. Yeah, they're right there. Perfect timing. They're a team that I've heard a lot of great things about. Manson, I haven't gotten to really scout too much at the 2B level, so I am a little misinformed when it comes to them. But I think he did a tremendous job in the rankings. Also, we're going to see if Toledo is really for real or not when they take on Alaska. That is going to be a big-time fight this week for the Riverhawks.
Yeah, I mean, if there's a team that's not present that I think has a gripe to be present, it is the Loggers. And if they do get the win this week against Toledo, I think that I think Tyson should look long and hard at their resume to this point, because they are putting up big numbers, Matt. I mean, beating a 1A team in Tenino. I know that Tenino is down right now this year after losing some key coaches from a season ago, and also some key players, but still putting 62 points up against Tenino and only giving up 21. I mean, it doesn't matter who's on the roster. That's still a very, very impressive win. So I think Alaska is one of those teams that everybody needs to pay very close attention to. And with a win this week against Toledo, they are, right there in the top 10. I don't really have a good pulse on Charles Manson myself, but I promise if they keep winning, I will eventually start to turn my attention to them. Northwest Christian and Riverview already had a matchup last week, like the week before last week, going in favor of Northwest Christian. And, I don't think that discounts what Riverview is. I had a chance to break down some film on them. They have a nice win against College Place earlier this year. It's going to be interesting to see who could possibly knock on the door when it comes to the Napavine and Okanagan. And I really do like Lind, Ritzville, Sprague, Washtuckna, all the other, names that go along with. There's another one. If Matt was with us, he should type in the YouTube chat all the 5 names of Lind, Ritzville. But anyway, I mean, Brody Boness is just a phenomenal athlete for Lind, Ritzville, Sprague. I mean, they are going to go as far as his talent can take him, honestly. And I guess the one thing that I pose is a question, Matt. I don't know if we're prepared to answer it right now because it's a what if question, but what if Napavine slips up against Linden Christian, and I don't even say slips up. Linden Christian's a tough team, and it's a classification above. And I don't think Napavine's really kind of played this level of competition. I'm not going to say that they haven't, but I think that they're going to see that Linden Christian is a very, very difficult team to beat. Would you drop them from number one? Would you put Okanagan above them at that point, or maybe a Lynn Britsville, depending on how things go in the other games?
I think it depends on how Napavine looks in a loss. If they come out and lose 2-3 possession game against Linden Christian, I think there's a very valid argument that you can bump Okanagan up in front of Napavine. I don't think that happens, though. I think Napavine takes care of business. And if they do lose, it's going to be real close. So I think you're going to see Napavine pretty much stay at one until they get knocked. Someone at the 2B level is going to have to beat the Tigers, I think, to knock them out of the top spot. I don't see them getting dropped from a loss to Linden Christian.
I also, think that Kalama is a real threat. They've got a schedule that kind of rivals, what Linden Christian has put together this year in terms of a gauntlet that's challenging. Linden Christian's is tougher, but when you're a 2B school and you're taking on Woodland, who's 2A, when you're taking on La Center, that is, really good at the 1A level, when you're taking on Castle Rock, who made the playoffs a year ago and took Eatonville down to the wire, and Eatonville had a super solid team. I mean, I think Kalama has done a phenomenal job at scheduling this season, and with a guy at quarterback like Aiden Brown and a Brill Bright at wide receiver. I mean, they got weapons all over the place, and I think it'd be a really interesting, intriguing matchup if we saw Napavine take on Kalama at some point. Any final thoughts at all on 2B before we roll the ticker on the 1A class?
Just one comment about Kalama. I got the privilege to talk to Coach Phelps before their first game last season when they were getting ready to take on Woodland, and he knew it wasn't just going to happen overnight. It was going to be a little bit of a process. They only had one returning senior from last year, going into last year, I should say, that played meaningful snaps for the Chinooks. So this is more so what you need to expect from Kalama as things go by, and they're always going to have a great quarterback. It's just the way that it is anymore. It's really unbelievable how they just go from one to the next and roll right along. It's crazy.
Yeah, super good development, honestly. And the thing is that you'll notice about Aiden Brown and also with Jackson Esri, you got guys that are multi-sport athletes that get in the weight room. I mean, yeah. They're constantly working themselves out. And they're also, they're selling themselves in two different ways. I mean, social media has done a great job of selling the work ethic. Everyone's putting out videos of their workout regimens and stuff, and their PR accomplishments, and then they're selling themselves on the field. Going out and showing what those results have been. A fruit of the labor, that, so to speak, that they've been putting in to really open everyone's eyes and make you focus in on, is it Kalama? Is it the athlete? And I think it's a combination of both. I think that the culture in Kalama really breeds good athletes, and it has for a long time since their first state championship back in the late 90s. So, score update at all for us on the Mariners?
It's not looking good. It's 8-3 Houston. Things are falling apart very rapidly.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Season's over, hey?
It's not looking good.
Not looking good?
We're on life
all
support.
Right. Let's move in. So we got 1A now on the bottom. Royal holding strong, obviously. And then Kings at 2, Nooksack at 3, Kashmir at 4, Lakeside at 5, Monty at 6, La Center at 7, Seton Catholic 8, LC at 9, and then Chelan undefeated at number 10. Nothing really changed overall in Tyson's rankings from last week to this week. Other than Linden Christian dropping a couple of spots after losing to Royal. I mean, a lot of teams are going to lose to Royal, and a lot of teams are going to drop in the rankings because of it, but that doesn't mean it has to be super far. Realistically, if you're putting like a hypothetical in front of me where I have to bet my life on Seton Catholic and Linden Christian, I would bet my life on LC in that matchup. So, I mean, I do see, though, that Seton Catholic, to a degree, has earned the ability to be considered amongst the ranks, and then at some point, it's kind of like the Bellevue effect. It's like Bellevue's going to play some really good teams, and then they're going to lose a couple of games. And, are you really going to have them at number 3? No. Are you going to have them at number 4? Probably not. You're going to have to give some teams some credit that are still undefeated at this point and won against some reasonable opponents there. So I can see why LC is still in the neighborhood here and not dropped off too far. Nothing really changes. Royal can't become a higher number 1, I don't think. But
right.
They have, in my mind. I mean, they're a clear cut 1 in my mind. But then again, I mean, not having a chance to see Kings in the equation, playing them at this season until potentially a playoff matchup, who knows? But I think Chelan very deserving of what they've accomplished so far this year, and obviously Lakeside with the win over Linden Christian. Montesano and La Center, I think you could flip a coin between those two teams at 6 and 7. I think that they're both where they probably should be, right next to each other. I mean, the misnomer here to me is just Seton Catholic in the equation. And, it's interesting to see, I mean, who's going to end up coming out of the wash in this whole equation. Freeman recently playing Lakeside tough. I would say that they're a team that is on the outside looking in. Deer Park, outside looking in, a couple losses, but teams that might have a chance to realistically make it to the postseason and do something once they're there. I think that the biggest mystery team out of all this, though, is Kashmir.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. I personally would put Lakeside 9 Mile Falls ahead of Kashmir right now. I trust Lakeside. I mean, we saw them do it last year. We got to put a little bit of weight on the program building itself. So I kind of flip them and put them ahead of Kashmir. But Kashmir has a chance to make a big-time statement this week against Ephrata. So a couple mysteries, because like you mentioned, you also have Seton Catholic at 8 ahead of Linden Christian, which is, I understand it, but there can be an argument against it as well. But either way, you're going to get a little bit of pushback no matter how you put those. I think Lakeside belongs at number 4. I think they're a top 4 team. Let's wait and see what Kashmir does this week against Ephrata. I get they looked really good against Toppenish, looked really good against Deer Park. I don't think that was the week before. It might have been just the week before. But they've played some really tough competition. I should just still give the slight edge to Lakeside. But, I mean, I think the teams are definitely right there in the top 10.
Yeah, Royal says, or Justin says Royal's number 0. So, no, I mean, that's like, top, I like that, actually, Justin. Yeah, I mean, I think Kashmir is going to have a pretty easy time, honestly, against Ephrata. I say that quietly because, I don't like to discredit teams, but I mean, Ephrata, a playoff team from last year. I mean, they lost to last season head-to-head against Kashmir, and then already the start of this year, I mean, I'll put it this way. I'll save it for later, right? We'll get to a little bit more about that matchup. But I think Kashmir's really good, honestly. I just don't know how that matchup would go if you had Lakeside against Kashmir at this point in the season. And Kashmir ended up going on the road and beating La Center last year, and there's been a lot of carryover from each team into this year. So I mean, I like where they're at personally, and I don't really care one way or the other at this point. To me, there's nothing super glaring here on this list that makes me look at it and be like, you know what? I don't think so. I will say this, right? And I don't want it to seem like a shot at all here, Tyson, but there's obviously a lot of, I guess, love when it comes to the Northwest Conference teams when they do end up losing here, because Nooksack losing to Kings, right? That doesn't look terrible, a 2-point loss to a team that's undefeated, but they're still at 3, right? When you've got a couple undefeated teams right behind it, albeit, right? Nooksack put the screws to Mountain View, who looks decent out of the Greater St. Helens League 3A right now. They're a really, really, really good team. Don't get me wrong, but it's one of those effect things, right? Like, do you reward the teams for winning all their games to this point, or do you really look at it and say, I would bet my life on Nooksack in a head-to-head matchup against those teams. I don't know if I quite feel confident enough to bet my life in that situation like I would with like Linden Christian against Seton Catholic.
Yeah, no, like I said, he's got the right teams. I believe they're in the top 10. It's really hard in the 1A classification because we don't get to see a lot of these teams actually meet in the regular season. It's always feels like you're ranking more of the leagues over the teams. To me, at least, I'm sure he goes through a much more detailed dive into these teams. But yeah, I'm right there with you. I think Linden Christian would beat Seton Catholic. Then you got teams like La Center and Montesano. I really don't know who would win that game. All I can confidently say is Royals number 1 or number 0 in that league. And I love seeing Kings up there at number 2. I think they deserve a lot of respect. They've played a tough schedule to begin the season. They've looked really good in their dominant wins so far. So I'm glad to see those 1 and 2. I still don't think we've seen the best Nooksack Valley either. I think they could end up crashing the party and making a state championship.
Oh yeah, I mean they got arguably the 1A player of the year in Colton Lentz. So they're very much a good team. And like Justin just threw in the comment section. I mean, they came out angry against Hoquiam and beat them 76-7. I mean, in the running clock era, Matt, I mean, that's a lot. So
a lot.
Yeah. So I mean, they may very well be the third best team. I mean, hell, depending on if they play Kings again, I mean, a 2-point game, I mean, that could go differently as well. So, I mean, I think that realistically they're right there in the fray and stuff. In terms of one team being undefeated and another, it's like, at what point are we going to like say, okay, it's like the AP, for instance, has Montesano at 3, there you go. Right. They're going to bump them up because the other teams are still undefeated to this point here. And, they've looked pretty impressive while being undefeated also. It's not like they're getting by on the skin of their teeth here. So, any final thoughts at all, 1A?
No, I think we kind of wrapped up on everything. I do still think it's crazy not seeing Toppenish in the top 10, but obviously they're having a down year. So it is bizarre. Man.
Yeah. They're just, I mean, that is definitely kind of the shocker of the year here, in terms of, I mean, honestly, so we had a chance to broadcast together over at Yaka Vegas, and you and I talked a lot about how splendid of an athlete Joshua Perez was last year for Toppenish. I mean, he looks like the biggest difference maker from losing him last year to this year on what one guy how he can affect a team, man. I mean, that guy did everything for them in all sports. So, I mean, that's a huge loss. I hope he's having a good freshman year someplace. So, all right. Let's go to 2A real quick. Our favorite classification.
Yeah, here we go.
All right. Here's how it goes. Enumclaw is still at number 1. And then right behind that, you've got Matt's favorite team, the Tumwater Thunderbirds, followed by Highline, the Pirates. Linden, after their win against Cedro, up to number 4, bouncing their way back. Anacortes still there at 5. Cedro not dropping off too far at number 6. Then North Kitsap at 7. Shug back at 8. Bremerton at 9. And then Aberdeen makes it their way into the top 10. Matt, I'll let you go first here in front of me. Thoughts on the 2A top 10 initially?
Yeah, we kind of touched on some of our thoughts earlier on Enumclaw. I personally have Tumwater as number 1, and I get, again, you have to play by results. Linden has had a couple of really, really tight wins, but they've also had that big loss that has them back at 4. I don't think Linden ends up being 4 when all is said and done. I'm glad he didn't drop Cedro Woolley down too far after that loss. Again, I know those players don't feel like it's a good loss, but it was an impressive loss. I think the rest of the state really respects those guys. I think an argument can be made that Bremerton should be even bumped up a little bit higher to number 8. I think they still got a couple prove-it games to see where they are. They got North Kitsap and Bainbridge back-to-back weeks on the road. So I think we'll learn more about Bremerton, see if they're really for real then, so I understand them still being at 9. But, I mean, you look at that, Linden, Anacortes, and Cedro Woolley, those 3, in the middle of these rankings, and yet there's the elephant in the room with how many bursts they get. So it's a tough thing for that league. But I'd personally, I've got Tumwater as the number one team right now.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that, and I've been, on record over the last couple of weeks that last week did it for me, Matt. When they beat, not this last game, but the week before, when they beat Kelso 54-0 running clock style.
Yeah.
I mean, I was sold at that moment in time. Like the game against North Kitsap really helped me get a lot closer to them being number one, because I felt that was one of the more impressive wins in the classification to that point in the season. But man, beating Kelso 54-0, a playoff team from a year ago that has Peyton Stewart on the roster still, an Oregon State commit, it's like to not even allow, a mishap touchdown. I think it's, really, really a sign that Tumwater is Tumwater, like Justin says in the comment section. And, anybody who knows football, I mean, Linden and Tumwater, the two winningest programs currently in the 2A classification. So, I mean, good to see them, where they're at from their standpoint. Bad for everybody else. Highline at 3. I said it, they're lurky, right? I mean, at 3, how could you be lurky, right? But
yeah, exactly.
Just wait, though. Like, just wait. When they end up playing a team in 2A in the postseason, I'm telling you what, I mean, these guys on film are fast. They got athletes all over. We talked to head coach of the Washougal Panthers, Dave Hayjack, last week, and he said that, in that loss that they had to Highline the year before in the playoffs, I mean, they're athletes all over the field at every position, and they've just gotten better from one year to the next. And I got no reason to doubt where Tyson's got Highline put here at number 3. They're going to continue to win all season long. They're going to finish 8-1. They're going to get a favorable matchup in the crossover round. They're going to win that. And you're going to be putting them somewhere in the 3 to 4 range more than likely, because there's going to be some shuffling here. I mean, I think Tumwater is going to end up winning, but whoever comes out of the Northwest Conference, when it comes to seeding time, they're going to jump Highline. And I think that's unfair. I'll get to it right now, because I think Highline's done everything they can to try to schedule their non-conference aggressive with Rainier Beach and with Kennedy Catholic. But at the end of the day, I think that the league that they're playing is going to end up kind of making their resume look a little bit softer. I don't think that's fair. I think that they're very much deserving of being the number 3 team. They could even be the second best team as of now. Fuck, they could be the best team. Who knows? But, Linden at 4 obviously sounds good. I'm okay with it. After beating Cedro in dramatic fashion, I mean, I do think that they are in the neighborhood of being a 4th best, 5th best team. Anacortes right there with them. And then Cedro. I mean, that just goes to show you how deep that league really is, and how depressing it is that one of those teams is going to end up on the outside looking in. And I already mentioned North Kitsap earlier today. I think that they're still a really good team. Nice bounce back win by Washougal. I'll tell you what. I mean, seeing them play the way that they played against Mark Morris, I don't know how they lost against Woodland, right? I mean, I really don't. They only punted the ball one time. They've only punted once in the last 2 weeks combined. Very, 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 very solid team. And I think that their biggest issue, if they had one, they gave up 323 yards rushing in that win to Mark Morris. Teams are going to be able to run the ball on them. When you find a team that can play defense as well, I think it's going to be a little bit more problematic for Washougal. I mean, they can't be that Emerald Ridge team, right? That relies too much on the star quarterback and putting up points in a hurry, which they can do on offense. But allowing a team like Woodland, who runs the ball a lot and plays a lot of ball control style offense, is really what killed Washougal and their inability to stop the run and get the ball back for their offense. So, I mean, until their defense really steps up and holds teams to under 175 yards a game rushing, I have a problem actually seeing Washougal going that deep in the postseason with the way things are going right now on the defensive side of the ball. The offensive side, if they're playing 7-on-7s, I'd give them the state championship, Matt.
Yeah, 100%. I'm right there with you. But you look at those top teams. You look at the teams that are at the top of this classification according to the rankings. Tumwater, they love to run the football. Linden, they love to run the football. So you're going to have to kind of dial that in. It's not well, maybe you're going to have to play one of these teams who's going to come and ground and pound you to death. So they got to figure those things out, because Elijah Anderson for Woodland, an absolute monster in the backfield. There's going to be a lot more of those guys coming your way as the season wears on. And guess what? Stopping the run gets harder and harder as we get into November and December, where it's cold, you're beat up, you're sore, and you're like, man, do I really have to go hit this guy who's coming downhill at me? It's tougher then. Now it's supposed to be when it's easier to stop the run. So they got to figure that out. I 100% agree with you, but I still think they'd be my bet to win the GSHL 2A. Hudson's Bay not being on here is a little bit surprising, but not really surprising. They still got a chunk of really tough games coming up, though. They have a chance to play their way into these rankings for sure.
Oh, win all your games, and yeah, of course you'll end up being exactly. There's no choice. I mean, at that point, you can't hide from anybody right now in the Greater St. Helens League. I'm with you on Hudson's Bay, though, trying to figure out a way to get them in here to the conversation. But ultimately, I think that their true RPI competition that they played, other than the Ridgefield game, not super impressive. That Ridgefield win is like the biggest win that they've had in the last 4 or 5 years of the program. So I mean, hats off to them for going on the road and getting it, remaining undefeated. Bremerton, we'll learn a little bit about. Bainbridge, though, man, the island, the sushi. Right?
Yeah, the sushi.
I want to see where they fit into the equation here in 2A. I'm interested to see where Bainbridge ends up. I mean, they got the game against North Kitsap coming up here this week. I mean, you want to talk about playing your way in, Matt. 4-0. You have a ferry that offers espresso and sushi, and then if you beat North Kitsap, I mean, you got to be in the top 10 at that point.
If they beat North Kitsap, they're not just going to be in the top 10. They're going to rock it right up, because they've been dominant in all 4 of their games this season. Their closest is, got the schedule right up. It was 47-20 win over Hazen. So yeah, if you go out and you beat North Kitsap, that sends a message, and I'd be stunned if they didn't crack their way into the top 10, especially when you have Anacortes and Cedar Woolley set to beat up on each other. So it's a game with a lot of meaning for Bainbridge, and a chance for the Spartans to kind of force everyone's hand and say, hey, it's time to put some respect on our name.
Yeah, I mean, we're also missing Rogers here from the Spokane area, the team that's undefeated, that the RPI computer absolutely loves, Justin's favorite robots. Teams you just really don't know a whole lot about, really. I mean, hasn't had a lot of program success in recent memory, and starting out undefeated this year is awesome. Computer loves you. We'll see how it goes. When you start playing some more competition, they got like the Clarkstons, the West Valleys of the world, the Pullmans of the world. So a league that hasn't produced a lot of super good teams in recent memory. Aberdeen getting their way into the top 10. I have got no problems with that, honestly. I mean, only losing to Montesano at this point. Montesano looks pretty good. I think Aberdeen's right there. And, with a couple wins. Oh, Brian says Bainbridge is 3A.
They're the lone 3A in that conference. That's right.
I wasn't sure about that. Brian, thank you so much. Appreciate the heads up. I wasn't sure how it worked out in that equation with them, because it seemingly looked as if they've been playing a 2A schedule mainly over the last couple of years, but I'll have to look a little bit deeper into that. But still, they have sushi on the ferry. So if they beat North Kitsap,
sushi and espresso.
And espresso. Yeah, I'm with you on the espresso, though. So, yeah, Aberdeen 10, no problem with it. And they got an opportunity to win their way higher as well. So, Ephrata with a win this week, I think they're knocking on the door. If they can figure out a way to beat Kashmir, that would be a very quality win. So, yeah.
And I'm excited. Tumwater does have a trap rivalry game with WF West, but I think the T-Birds are going to take care of business. So I'd be surprised if, give it a few weeks when Tumwater just continues to steamroll, I think they're going to try and force their way into the number 1 spot. It's going to be interesting, but Enumclaw, if they keep winning like they are, can you really bump Tumwater up? It's that 2A, the top 3 is really about as interesting as it gets.
You certainly can. It happened last year. Like what's the committee going to change their mind on? I mean, Enumclaw was undefeated last year and they didn't even get the top seed. So, I mean, Linden was undefeated also, right? So, I mean, it wasn't like it was like, too terrible. But if I remember, I think North Kitsap got the 2, and I don't even think that Enumclaw
I think
got in the top
Enumclaw
2
was
after finishing undefeated.
I think Enumclaw was the 4 because I think WF West was. I think
Yeah,
WF West was 2 and North Kitsap was 3. Actually, if I
yeah.
remember right, because
Well,
WF West only loss was to Linden.
yeah. I mean,
It was weird.
they ran the table and didn't get the top seed. I know that much. I don't think they got a top 2. Yeah, they were the 4 seed because they matched up with Linden, the 1 seed in the semis. It was a 1-4 matchup. Yeah. Yep. So, anyway, yeah, we'll see how it goes, but yeah, 2A super competitive. Actually, with Linden losing that game to Ferndale and then seeing them getting taken down to the wire by Cedro this last week. I think we could see just about anything when it comes to the 2A time. I mean, you got Linden in the championship game winning. I had Anacortes, so we'll see how that goes. But all right, let's move on to 3A real quick. We're getting a little bit closer here. So, this is where it gets a really, really tough because there's a lot of good teams in 3A, if you ask me, Matt. O'Day at number 1, Yelm at number 2, the most forgotten team ranked 2 or 3 in the state. Eastside Catholic 3, Kennewick 4, Bellevue at 5, Monroe 6, Mount Spokane 7, Garfield at 8, Arlington at 9, and then Juanita at 10. I think that's just more of a product of Juanita winning all their games to this point, just to start that out with. But 1, 2, and 3. I mean, all Yelm has done is won every game that they've played in the last season plus 4 so far. And again, I think that they're being really heavily slept on here. I think that when you look at how the opening game went against Camas, where season openers are always tough, Matt. You really don't know what you're going to get in week number 1 sometimes, and you never know how another team is going to prepare for you. I mean, you're talking about Camas knowing that they're playing Yelm week 1 for 3, 4, 5, 6 straight months and preparing for that week and, given the defending champs everything that they got. I still think Yelm looks really good overall. I mean, they still got tons of guys overall. O'Day and Eastside Catholic, they play this week. Obviously, that'll be settled this weekend on the field. I mean, they played twice last year. Eastside Catholic winning them both. Is this the year where O'Day kind of gets over the hump and, conquers the Eastside Catholic problem that they've got? I got no problem with where they're at 1, 2, and 3 right now. I think that you could really mix those teams up, and I'd be okay with it. Kennewick, yes, above Bellevue, only because Bellevue with the 2 losses. I think at some point, again, you have to put Bellevue behind some teams that have won. After that, I think it's just a big amount of unknowns, a lot of question marks. I think that Arlington and Monroe are probably the next best 2 teams at that point. But I also think that there's a lot of teams that on any one given week can cause a lot of problems for you. What would be your thoughts on 3A?
I'm very high on Monroe right now. Personally, I think they have a very good team. I think they've got arguably the best quarterback in the state. He's an absolute monster. We'll talk more about him. We're previewing their game against Montlake Terrace coming up. But I agree with you. I think the top 3 are pretty rock solid. You can jumble them up any way you can. I think whoever wins that O'Day and Eastside Catholic game this week is going to take that number 1 spot. I'd be surprised if they didn't. I love Kennewick at 4. Again, they're still my state champion pick. Bellevue, they're an interesting one. Those 2 losses are against such high level competition. I mean, one of them coming to Lake Stevens, the reigning 4A champs, that, the 2 losses, you have to drop them back, but you can't drop them back too far. So I think he did a really, really good job with the top 5. I agree with them. Monroe at 6. Mount Spokane, I still really love them. I think that they are kind of a sneaky team, a team that can get into the state playoffs and then pull off an upset where everyone kind of scratches their head and say, wow, we didn't see that one coming. And then Arlington, we teased them a little bit. Man, they looked just so good last week. If they can keep that rolling, they're just going to keep climbing up those rankings because, I mean, there's really no argument against them right now. They've looked just so good in every single one of their games. So, again, the 3A classification loaded with talent, going to be a wild state tournament. I'm in love with the top 5 right now. I think he did a really, really good job. Monroe and Arlington, I'm right there with you. Just lurking on the outside, but also I don't think you can sleep on Mount Spokane right now either.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you could probably reach down deep and throw in some other teams here. I mean, Marysville Pilchuck not pictured in the bottom of the rankings here, and they're pictured as number one in the robots' eyes for in terms of the RPI standings. So uh, and Pilchuck hasn't like had like dog shit wins or anything like that. They've been beating good teams along the way as well. I mean, the game that they just had against Oak Harbor, not too sexy. I mean, a 21-12 win, but they've been taking care of business up to this point. They demolished Stanwood. They beat Getchell. So yeah, I mean, I think Pilchuck's a team that is on the outside here of this equation that might have something to say by the time the season's over with. And you could also go to a team, like Mount Lake Terrace, who's undefeated right now. Xavion Jones, a really good running back. They play Monroe this week. We'll pick that game in just a little while. And then you got Timberline, and then you got Gig Harbor and Peninsula. Those are teams that can still win games. And you got Spanaway Lake with Darian Clemens. I mean, there's a lot of different guys and players, and the way that the schedule is going to break down for some of them, they're going to have a realistic opportunity to play their way into the tournament. And once you get in, Matt, I mean, anything's possible. Garfield, I think, is one of those teams that is always going to be the product of playing in a very tough league, and they've got really good players also. With Kavanagh and such. So it's definitely a tough conference or classification to gauge. You want to jump in here? Last thing I want to mention is I just don't know how in love I am with Mount Spokane at this point. I think that we're going to learn a lot more about them coming up in a very short period of time. But I feel like that there's some teams over here on this side of the mountain that are slightly better than them at this point.
Yeah, you could definitely say that for sure. I 100% agree with you. One thing I wanted to add is you kind of talked about once you get in, anything can happen. You don't have to go back too far to have proof of that. I mean, Mount Baker was playing in a tiebreaker last year, and all of a sudden they're playing Royal for a state championship. So, yeah, once you sneak in, anything can happen. Mount Tahoma, I really like, but I understand why they're not ranked. Those two losses right out of the gate has them kind of on the outside looking in. Spanaway Lake definitely has some issues right now. I really like that Gig Harbor Timberline game this week. I think the winner of that one has a very strong argument to get in. Timberline's only loss so far this season, I believe, was to Eastmont back in week 2, or it might have been week 3. But I mean, they played them so tough. They've got just uber athletes all over the field for Timberline. So that's a game to watch. And I think Gig Harbor's just getting better each and every week. So don't sleep on the Tides either.
Yeah, Jake says Mountain View in the live stream comment section. We'll see. I mean, I not to crap on teams, right? That's not the goal of this, but teams as of late that have came out of the Greater St. Helens League, have not fared very well beyond the opening crossover round against some of the upper echelon teams there. I mean, Nooksack Valley handled Mountain View earlier this year, and there's a lot of teams in 3A that are better than Nooksack Valley. So I mean, it's going to be tough in my eye. So I do think personally though that Mountain View is going to find a way to play their way to at least the second seed, maybe win the league with competing with Kelso. They take on Evergreen this week, and Evergreen, just played a Glacier Peak team that, held them scoreless for either the entire game or the majority of the game, but we'll see how it goes for Mountain View. I mean, but they're a long ways away in my estimation of cracking the top 15 even. So
one thing I will say is Mountain View has a golden opportunity. I believe they finished their season against Richland, if I remember right. So that is a good opportunity for them to kind of send one last message to the committee if they can win out. If they win out, it's going to be hard to keep them out of the top 10. But yeah, it's a gauntlet of a schedule. So it's
I want to
kind of
say they
prove
just
it.
played Hanford, right? Didn't they just play Hanford this last week too? I think
Yeah, they
another
played
4A
Hanford,
team.
and I'm pretty sure they end against Richland this season. They beat Hanford, yeah, and then they finished off against Richland in the last week of the season. So yeah, there's ample opportunity still for the Thunder to go out there and show what they're made of.
Lightning, then the Thunder. All right.
Exactly.
Let's close it out here. 4A, the meat and potatoes, Matt. At number 1, I mean, we've had some controversy on the show with our Lake Stevens crowd here because everyone in the Lake Stevens crowd thinks that they're number 1, and they very well might be still. But Graham Kapowson still holds the spot on Tyson's list. Lake Stevens still at number 2 despite losing to West Lynn. Skyview holding strong at 3. Curtis makes their way all the way up into the top 4 at number 4, and then Bothell at 5. Above Emerald Ridge, who's at 6, and then Moses Lake, Tyson's favorite team, number 7. East Lake at 8, Camas at 9, Woodinville at 10. We've got a big matchup coming up this week with East Lake and Woodinville, 2 teams that Tyson likes. The computer really likes both those teams as well. East Lake, number 1, Woodinville, I think, number 3, right behind that. So, I mean, top 10 looks fairly deep here, Matt. I think a lot of these teams here have a realistic chance of making a deep run. I wouldn't be shocked to see anybody on this list playing for a state championship.
No, I've been shouting from the rooftops that GK is winning the state title since before last season ever ended. I believe it was them against Emerald Ridge at the midway point of the season where I said this team, they might not quite be ready, and they almost proved that to be wrong, but next year they're winning the state title. So I agree they're number 1. Lake Stevens has an argument to be number 1, though. They're a very good team, but I just GK, that offense is too explosive. The defensive line is just getting better and better each and every week. I just can't find a weak spot with the Eagles right now, except for they had a little bit of a hiccup against Olympia, but they have a chance to kind of right those wrongs. I love Skyview. I still would put Curtis slightly ahead of the Storm, but I mean, you're splitting hairs when it comes to that one. I still think Camas, they haven't had the best looking results so far this season, but I don't think they're a team that anyone's going to want to play come November. I still think that they're a team that we see make a deep run into the state playoffs. I don't know how much I buy Moses Lake. I know he's in love with them, and it blows up my Twitter feed. I see a lot of Moses Lake love going in. I just go back to the Chiawana argument last year, where once those teams from the east side come over and play these teams from the west side, it's a different animal, it seems like, every single year. So, yeah, you got to rank one of those teams from the east side high up, but until that they can come over and knock off some of these top teams from west of the Cascades, it's just hard to bump them up too high.
Yeah, I mean, to kind of piggyback on the Moses Lake, theory, a really quality win on the road against Kamiakin. Got no problem with that. They absolutely dismantled Ephrata, which, a 4A school, should do to a 2A school. But man, they got a really, really dynamic player. We got a highlight sent to us by Kyson Thomas making a one-handed catch in the corner of the end zone in the game that they just most recently had. And oh my gosh, it was almost like Stickum was used on that hand, man, to pull that thing in. It was just such a balancing act too. I mean, really good athlete, and they've got a lot of good players over there. And that win that they had is as big as any win's going to be for some teams over east of the Cascade. Tough to win a game against Kamiakin, for that matter, at any venue. So I mean, I think that's nothing to sneeze at. I've been wondering how long it's going to be before Curtis enters the conversation with Graham Kapowson. And, are we there yet? Are we there to say that Curtis might be better at this point? And, we've been jock riding Graham Kapowson just as much as everybody else has this year, and I know that Lake Stevens feels like that they're getting thrown under the bus a little bit. But man, it's just so hard to overlook the weapons that were added from GK over the season to off season to this year, and then the development of Rocco Koch. And you mentioned Curtis's defense. I mean, when you've got an offense that's performing at that level, your defense only needs to come up with 3 or 4 stops a game ultimately to give the ball back to your quarterback. And I don't know what your thoughts are on that, whole slant with Graham Kapowski and Curtis. Like, how close are we? What are we at the point now where we should realistically be thinking Curtis is better?
Ready or not, they play each other next week. So Curtis has an opportunity to prove that. We're going to find out. We're not really going to have to think about it. They're going to play head to head, and we're going to see who gets the win. The problem is Curtis have had trouble stopping teams so far. So is the defense going to be worked fully into their full potential by next week? I think Curtis is a team that is going to be playing their best football in November and December. I don't think they're going to be quite at 100% going into next week against GK. So I think GK is going to beat them. And then we'll see how Curtis responds from that. I think Curtis is going to take a little bit of adversity to really get them at their 100% capacity. Is there an argument that they can be ahead of Skyview? Yeah, I think so personally. I'd probably put them ahead of Skyview. I don't know if they'd stay there. I think the Storm are a really good team that are kind of slept on a little bit in the grand scheme of things. But the SPSL 4A, just those teams are so battle tested that by the time they get to November, they are locked and loaded. They know how to beat the best teams. They know how to play tough with the best teams, which is why I also don't think you can overlook Emerald Ridge going into the playoffs either. I just think that league's so stacked. And I'm excited. I haven't been able to watch Bothell yet this season, but I've heard really, really good things about the Cougars. So I'm excited to really dive in and watch them a little bit more here as the season progresses.
Yeah, I mean, Bothell's looked pretty good overall. The only loss is to Skyview. And Skyview's defense has probably been the best in the 4A class so far this year. Holding that Bothell team to just 7 points. They held Jesuit of Oregon scoreless in the win that they had. They beat the brakes off of Columbia River in the Hazeldale rivalry, which they should do, by the way. So, I mean, I think Skyview is, got a phenomenal defense overall. Don't sleep on the defensive effort, though, of Eastlake and Woodinville. The Kingco is super tough. I think Bothell's got a better opportunity than Skyview in terms of getting above them if Skyview slips up again. I think that the 4A, because the 4A Kingco is so much deeper than where the Greater St. Helens League is. The Greater St. Helens League has only got 4 teams in it, right? So, I mean, that's why you see them scheduling a bunch of non-conference games just to fill up their schedule. And they always try to fill it up with tough opponents. Bothell's going to play tough opponents every week. I mean, even teams like Issaquah are super tough. The game that they just had against North Creek, winning by, almost 4 scores, very impressive in that league. Skyline, super tough. Mount Si, and obviously Woodinville, Eastlake. I mean, they're going to play their way in. If Skyview slips up somewhere, and those two teams have even records, like let's say they're both 8-1, I'd have a hard time not putting Bothell above them and ignoring the head-to-head loss because it was on the road at Skyview earlier in the season, and I think Bothell would have survived a little bit more tougher of a schedule week in and week out. But speaking of the Greater St. Helens League real quick, you're going to be calling a game with the Battleground Tigers, who are undefeated still to this point in 4A. They are a huge unknown for just about everybody in the state. So, I mean, you could be looking at Skyview, Camas, Battleground all battling it out for 2 spots there. So, I don't know where you wanted to go after that, but that's a team that is on the outside looking in that I think that you should keep your eye on. They got a big one coming up this week, a chance to maybe crack the rankings.
Yeah, they'll go to George Norty Field to take on Mount Tahoma. I'll be there, noon kickoff on Saturday. It's going to be a really important game for both sides. I don't want to drop too far back into 3A, but if Mount Tahoma wins that one, I think that they're going to have a very valid argument to crack the top 10 of the 3A classification despite the 2 losses. But Battleground, it's a chance for them to really assert themselves. I mean, I feel like we overlook them every year in every sport. They have solid teams constantly. This feels like the first real test for them in my eyes. The first time that they'll actually go in and have to prove what they have. I mean, they've given up 7 points all season. those 7 points came to Prairie. No disrespect to the GSHL, but offenses in that league are kind of down right now. In my eyes, it's more of a defensive driven league. Now they're going to play Mount Tahoma this week. Then they play Lakes the following week. So we're going to learn a lot about Battleground. We're in the midway point of the season, but I feel like we're still in the learning phase of the season. So we're going to learn where Battleground really sits this week and next week. They have a chance to knock off 2 really, really good 3A programs. And if they can do that, guess what? There's no argument against them anymore. They've been tested.
Yeah, I mean, Battleground has a good young quarterback that you're going to like. Ethan Adams runs the offense very well. Deceptive. There's a lot of motion out of the backfield there. Good running back, wide receiver, athlete, Jacob Champagne. Champagne. They're going to be a good team and a good game for you to watch. And I wouldn't be shocked to see them beat Mount Tahoma. In fact, I moderately expect it. They're a very good team, and their culture has kind of been building over the last couple of seasons. And they went with a younger guy at quarterback this year because they felt like that they had other pieces in place around the team. So we'll see how it goes in that game. But I think that they're on the outside, about ready to knock the door down with a win against Mount Tahoma. But yeah, I mean, back to the Lake Stevens thing real quick. I mean, losing a game to West Lynn is not the end of the world for them. No. It's a tough game to win. Oregon has produced some super good teams in years past. And I think that that's a great game for Lake Stevens to have played. And, I have no problem still, put them at number 1 at this point. I really don't. I think that they're a very good team too. I mean, this is the one league in my mind, Matt, that's so tough to really decide who's number 1.
Yeah, I think you're dead on with it. Lake Stevens, I mean, they're the defending state champions, and they play a gauntlet. They really do. They try and just play the toughest schedule possible, get their team ready for those late playoff games because that's where they're expected to be. I mean, they played Bellevue in week 2. It went down as a win, but Bellevue looked really, really strong in that game, and it took a comeback for Lake Stevens to go and fight their way back and win that one. So I think that loss is literally the difference between them and GK. I think if they're undefeated, you have to put them ahead of GK because, again, to be the man, you got to beat the man. I could quote wrestling all day, but I won't, thank goodness. That's what it comes down to, is that one loss. But guess what? Lake Stevens is going to have an opportunity to prove everyone wrong and go out there and try and win a second straight state title. But, man, that high-powered GK offense is just ridiculous to watch. No one's been able to stop it. So I've got them locked in at number 1, and I really don't feel bad about it. I apologize to the Lake Stevens fans. It was a blast calling their state championship win over Kendi Catholic last season, but GK is just too good in my eyes.
Well, a lot is going to play out, that's for sure. I mean, those two teams won't play out against each other until possibly the postseason, but back on the win your way there, Matt. I mean, if
exactly
if Graham-Kapowsin goes undefeated in SPSL, they got to be number 1 in my opinion. I mean, and that's no disrespect to Lake Stevens, but like you mentioned, the comeback win against Bellevue had them on the ropes, and the coaching staff for Lake Stevens just really, really just laid into the team and really challenged them at halftime, and they responded, right? And they got a great quarterback at Lake Stevens. So, I mean, it's going to be very, very different, I think, in the postseason than it was last year. Those two teams played, Graham-Kapowsin and Lake Stevens, and I think that this year's version of Graham-Kapowsin is going to be more competitive, if not slightly better. But we've been saying that all year long, and I guarantee that every one of the Lake Stevens fans, which we love, who've been so kind to be a part of the show, is like, I'm glad to eat humble pie. Like, I am not here to doubt. We're talking 1A, 1B here in terms of like best teams in my opinion, but don't sleep on Skyview, like Matt said. He's absolutely right. Don't sleep on Curtis and Bothell. Winner of Kinko 4A, whether it's Bothell, Eastlake, or Woodinville, any of those one teams is going to be a problem for everybody else as well. And you know what? We don't even see Kamayakin here, or we don't even see Chiawana here, right? So I mean, there's teams out there that are Gonzaga Prep, right? I'm telling you right now, don't sleep on the Bullpups.
I love it. I love it. Digging into them for our picks segment.
Yeah, let's get to it.
I was sleeping on them.
Right. I mean, rightfully so. But it's the whole, West side, East side, coverage, demographic. I look forward to seeing more live stream coverage from East side of the mountain, so we can get more of an idea about all of these teams. So hopefully that's coming down the pike here. All right, let's get to some games, and we'll burn through these here real quick and go through some notes. All right, our number one game of the week. It ain't close, folks. Eastside Catholic at O'Day. Last year, Matt, again, I mentioned it earlier, Eastside Catholic 2-0 versus O'Day. Hard to ignore that. I think that it's one of those games to where you can't go wrong with whoever you pick. Eastside Catholic has just been one of the best programs over the last decade in 3A. You compare them with Bellevue. Those two teams went at it for several years. It seemed like in every single championship. We've been talking a little bit about, is this the year that O'Day kind of re-cracks their way into the conversation for getting the state championship? I have a hard time on that one here. I'm ultimately going to go with Eastside Catholic here in this one. I think that their coaching has served them well over the last several years. And even though they don't have the name recognition that some of the O'Day players have, I think that they have a better team aspect behind them. And I think that they're the type of team that finds a way to win. Just go back to that game that they had against Yelm last year, pretty much written off as having no chance, and they literally had the state championship ripped from their hands. So I'm going Eastside Catholic in a close one here.
Yeah, that was a heartbreaking loss for the Crusaders last year in that state championship, and for some reason I think you're right. They kind of were written off, and that's a weird thing to say about Eastside Catholic. For me, this game comes down to their secondary. Jason Brown Jr. is going to get his yards. There's really nothing anyone can do about this, at least at the high school level. He's going to ground and pound. You have to stop the passing attack. I think this one turns into a little bit of a higher scoring game. If you let O'Day just do whatever they want on offense, you don't have a chance. They're going to be just way too powerful on offense. But then you got this Eastside Catholic defense, which I just love. I think they're really, really good. AJ Tanupo and David Lene are just absolute monsters. And then this secondary, I think, is one of the very best in the state, regardless of classification. So I'm also taking Eastside Catholic very, very close, just like you, Nick. I'm going to copy you since you're so smart.
So that sounds like a backhanded compliment there.
No, I think that.
Sure. Tyson has phoned in his picks here, and he is going with O'Day in this one. So we will see how the tree shakes out in that matchup. But a huge game of the week. Super, super excited to see how that one plays out this weekend, Matt. Next game on the docket, Kingco 4A, Woodinville at Eastlake. Both teams come into this one undefeated at 4-0. Both teams are loved by the computers. Last season, Eastlake won the game 27-0 on the road at Woodinville. Matt, I mean, it's tough for me to overlook that, but it's a different team in a different year. Blake Borup not there anymore for Eastlake. I just don't know how they're going to be able to stop the explosive potential for Woodinville, and Woodinville coming off of a couple of big out-of-state wins, the season opening shutout win against the squad from Hawaii, and then taking down CDA last week from Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. I'm going to go with the road team getting the vengeance in this one. I'm taking Woodinville.
Ooh, going with the Woodinville squad that pulled off the biggest upset, I think, in the state playoffs last season when they knocked off Glacier Peak. I'm sticking with Eastlake. I think they get a massive win. I hope they're not overlooking Woodinville going into Lake Stevens the following week. Home field advantage, I think, is a big deal in this one. Woodinville, I agree with you, much better this season, but I think Eastlake is still really, really talented. Landon Renfro is an absolute stud, and Grady Woodward might be one of the most explosive players in the entire state, and we really don't talk. I just think there's too many weapons on this Eastlake offense, so I'm going to go ahead and take Eastlake in this one.
Tyson is going with Woodinville in this one, so odd man out here could be you. By the way, Devin's still going to give us his picks as well, so could have some splits here as we go through the picks. Next one, Skyline at Bothell, another Kingco banger of a matchup. These two teams both 3-1, so a loss here really will set one of these teams behind the 8 ball in terms of catching the winner of Woodinville and Eastlake. I don't think that this really comes down to a matchup of desperation, though. I think it just comes down to a matchup of who can be more efficient and who can avoid the mistakes. Last year, it was 14-10 Skyline, and Skyline had, in my opinion, one of the best secondaries in the state. And a couple of those guys and Robinson have moved on. And I think Bothell is able to do a little bit more through the air in this matchup. So I'm choosing Bothell in a close one, plus the home field advantage.
Yeah, defense is definitely a story to me in this one. Skyline's allowed about 10 points per game so far this season. Those are against some teams like Eastlake and Mount Si. But Bothell, they also have a very good defense, allowing 6 points per game against teams like Skyview and North Creek. So Bothell, very, very talented. The loss to Skyview, I think, is just going to wake up Bothell. It's going to have them focused in and know that, hey, it's going to be nonstop work this entire season because we're going to see those guys again. Jalen Vyers is the difference maker for me as well. You kind of said exactly what I was going to. The passing game of Bothell, I think, turns out to be the difference maker. I got the Cougars win this one as well.
And Tyson is going to go with Bothell in this one. So we've got a sweep for the Cougars of Bothell, 3-love, straight set victory. Next, number 4 on the docket, another great game. This week's just full of great games, Matt. Kennewick at Chiawana, MCC 3A, 4A hybrid matchup. Kennewick 4-0, ranked very high. Chiawana 3-1, only lost, a tough one to start the season against Kamaic. And, if you look at who beat who, the equation says Kennewick should win this game. Again, though, you're going to get a more desperate team, in my opinion, in Chiawana. So this one's really, really tough for me. I ultimately went with Kennewick in this one, in a very close one. So I think it just comes down to more defense for Kennewick.
I mean, I picked Kennewick to win the state title, Nick, so there's no reason for me to hop off that wagon right now. A win over Kamaikan last week, very, very impressive. One of the best wins I've seen any team have all season. I was really buying all in to Kamaikan after their big week 1 start. I think they're a very good team. So to see Kennewick go out there and get that win, Chiawana's defense is kind of an X factor. 5 defensive scores so far this season, but Kennewick takes care of the football. Ambrose Driver, this dude's an absolute playmaker, and I think Kennewick's better up front on both sides of the ball. So I'm also going to take Kennewick to get the job done there.
5th game on the docket in 4A still, Graham Kapowson at Sumner. On the surface, Matt, this doesn't look like a hard game to pick, but Sumner coming off of a win against Puyallup, but also an injury loss to Matthew Spurbeck. You think that, okay, GK can take a deep breath here. I don't think it's quite that simple here. Super Alice, Woods, and Durant and company, obviously a lot of firepower. That's the only reason why I'm really going with Graham Kapowson in this one, is that, while Sumner has been able to, perform well at times this year, the defense has been the one side of the ball to where I have question marks about how many stops can they generate in a game, regardless of home field advantage or not. And last year, Sumner built the confidence of knowing that they could beat Graham Kapowsin 34-31. Is the addition of Durant that simple, right, to the equation for Graham Kapowsin? Those are the questions that I ask myself. Ultimately, I'm going to trust what everybody else thinks that they know about Graham Kapowsin, is that they're good enough to win this game and good enough to compete for a state championship. The loss to, to Sumner with Spurbeck going out is devastating. I do think it's closer, though, than what most people might think looking at this game on the surface. I'm still going Graham Kapowsin after all of that.
Sumner has had shootouts this season. They had that one with Curtis, which was epic. I watched the replay of that one. And then they had another with Emerald Ridge. And they really had another last week with Puyallup where they actually came out victorious. The loss to Spurbeck, I think, is a massive blow to Sumner. Davian Suprales is my favorite. I know I'm not supposed to have favorites. I'm an unbiased broadcast. He's my favorite high school football player to watch right now. He is incredible. 30-plus points allowed by Sumner to Curtis, Emerald Ridge, and Puyallup. I think Graham Kapowsin's offense isn't just as good as those. I even give them the edge over those teams. So the question is, can Sumner beat GK in a shootout? I just don't think there's enough firepower there, especially with Spurbeck going down. I think Graham Kapowsin gets a big win and sets up that game of the year, in my eyes, with Curtis the following week. Give me GK.
Next one, still 4A, Gonzaga Prep. The Bullpups taking on Ridgeline. A couple of 3-1 teams over there in the Spokane League. And, Gonzaga Prep, super under the radar. Ridgeline playing a very, very tough competitive game in their only loss earlier in the year to Mount Spokane. Both of them playing Meade and getting victories so far. So, on the surface, I think that Gonzaga Prep is going to be able to come up with more defensive stops in my estimation in this one. And Ridgeline, I think, is in that same category as, like, say, Ording, to where, a real rough year last season, a good turnaround already this year. Are they ready to take on a team in Gonzaga Prep that, has been, the bulldog, for lack of a better term, the team from the east side of the mountains over the last few years, and Gonzaga Prep with more playoff experience recently and playoff success. I know that doesn't usually run into the next year, but Gonzaga Prep played really good. They won last year's matchup 49-12 at home. So I'm still going to stick with Gonzaga Prep, even though they're on the road in this one.
Yeah, I want to go opposite of you one of these games, Nick, but I can't do it here. I told you I was sleeping on Gonzaga Prep in a big, big way. Diving into their numbers while previewing this game, I'm like, wow, this team is very, very good, especially offensively. One guy jumped out at me, Jonah Keller, averaging over 100 yards per game. And Gonzaga Prep, when you can run the ball like that, you can just ground and pound that clock away. So I think control the clock. I think their offense is going to roll in this one, and I got the Bullpups as well.
Seventh game on the docket, down to 3A. Marysville Pilchuck, undefeated, 4-0 at Ferndale, 3-1. Big matchup here, Matt. Last year it was 35-21, Ferndale on the road at Pilchuck. And you know that the Golden Eagles are going to have just an absolute rough week of practice getting ready for this one. You can bet your bottom dollar that they do not want to have their pants pulled down again like they did last week against Arlington. And, honestly, it comes down to, if you want to win a league championship, Matt, you've got to come up with this victory somehow. And I think Ferndale bounces back and gets a dub here over Pilchuck. And Pilchuck's win over Oak Harbor last week by 9 does not bode well with me heading into this game against Ferndale. It kind of tells me that they might have been looking ahead to it. So I like to see a more disciplined football team here. So I'm going Ferndale.
There's two things that could have changed for me. If Ferndale won last week over Arlington, I would have picked Marysville Pilchuck. Or if this game was at Marysville Pilchuck, I would have picked them. Bad news is Ferndale lost that last week, and now they get Marysville Pilchuck at home. I'm also going with Ferndale. I don't think they're going to let another week go by where they have a bad performance. I think you're going to see more of that defense that we saw week 1 against Linden. I think their defense is very talented, so I also have Ferndale winning this one.
Tyson has Ferndale as well, so a clean sweep. He also has Gonzaga Prep, so another clean sweep there. Um, Great minds think alike here, Matt.
Or whatever we
Mount
have.
Lake Terrace at Monroe, man. Another one of those teams in Mount Lake Terrace that can have a chance to kind of just play their way into notoriety here. 4-0, heading on to Monroe to take on, a really, really explosive offensive team. Last year, 49-7 Monroe in a road victory at Mount Lake Terrace. If Terrace has one thing working for him, it's that their defense has only allowed 27 points so far on the season. I mean, 6 points, 6.5 points essentially per ball game. I mean, that's going to help you win a lot of games. Xavier Jones, a great running back. So, I mean, that Mount Lake Terrace can run the football, but what can they generate against a team that's a top 10 team currently in 3A and a good defense? And I think that Monroe has more firepower, ultimately more big playability, stretching it down the field through the air attack as well. So I'm going Monroe in this one.
Yeah, Mount Lake Terrace. I think this is going to be a coming out party for Xavier Jones. If people aren't paying attention to him yet, they should start. This is your wake up call. They're so talented. But I love Blake Springer, the quarterback for Monroe. I think he's must see TV. 11 touchdowns in his 4 games this season, and he's been playing since day one coming onto this team. I like Monroe to get the job done here as well. But I think it's going to be a good performance for Mount Lake Terrace. Kind of earn them a little bit more respect than they've been getting early on this season.
Yeah, Springer had a great season last year, and no reason to think that he doesn't have the capabilities of getting Monroe deep into the postseason. And this is probably the toughest test that they're going to face in their league schedule. And if they get past this one, I mean, they're another one of those teams that we can kind of group in with the Montesano, the Low Center, the Kennewick's. They can end up getting a pretty decent path and getting a good seed into the playoffs, which is going to be helpful for a team like Monroe. Arlington, they could end up playing their way into having that good resume, with some wins in their league. But yeah, ultimately, I think Monroe's got way too much firepower here for Mount Lake Terrace. And I think that the competition level that Mount Lake Terrace has played to this point is kind of more of a reason as to why that they've only allowed the 27 points so far this year. So, no shock, Tyson's also going Monroe. Arlington at Stanwood. Ultimately, I thought about skipping this game here, but Stanwood won last year 37-6, Matt. So after I saw that, I'm like, I think that we should probably put this one on the schedule here. I don't know if it's quite as clear cut as everybody thinks it is, because just like Ferndale's coming off an embarrassing loss, Arlington's coming off an embarrassing win. Easy for high school kids to get emotional about victories like that against a team that doesn't get handed many L's in that fashion. When you're talking about Ferndale, that's a big spread there. And I wonder how Bumgardner is able to play in this game for Stanwood, and if he's going to be able to be effective at all. Ultimately, I look at Stanwood's loss to Pilchuck at this point in the year, and I just can't get over the mental hurdle that it's putting in front of me to ultimately pick them. I think it's a lot closer than people might think, and I'm still going to go Arlington, but this was a tough one actually for me to go back on. I think Stanwood's in that desperation mode. They need a win if they're going to stay in the conversation for possibly getting a league championship.
I'm going Arlington as well. I didn't really have to think too much about this one, if I'm being honest. No disrespect to Stanwood. I just think Arlington is blistering hot right now. I think when an offense is rolling like they were last week against Ferndale, they obviously found the right buttons to push right now with how that offense is going. So I think Arlington gets the job done. It's going to be a little bit of a wake-up call for Stanwood. They're going to have to figure some things out as well, because they've gotten off to a little bit of a slow start. But I just think it's more about how good Arlington is right now than anything else. So I'll also take Arlington.
10th game that we are picking. By the way, Tyson's also going Arlington. We all suck.
You're boring.
Let's see, number 10, Seaholm at Linden. Yeah, I mean, Seaholm played Linden really tough last year, Matt, 21-12 in that game. Seaholm last week, though, didn't really put together the bounce back win that I thought that they would against Burlington Edison, only winning that one 14-7. The only thing that you would really hope for if you're Seaholm in this capacity, well, two things. One, you play a lot better. And two, your opponent is still riding high from the comeback victory that they had the previous week.
Yeah.
I don't think that's enough, though, in this situation for Seaholm. I think that they have enough in them to play it tough for, the first half or so. But ultimately, even though Linden might be short a couple of players, I'm going to go Lions. They've got the depth that continues to, fill spots no matter who's there and who's not there.
Yeah, I like Linden, especially with it being at home for the Lions. That place was absolutely jammed packed when I went up there, and the fans are always excited about their teams. It's not just football; it's literally everything. They always have such a good attendance. Brant Hepner is an absolute just monster on the field. Again, he looks like a creative player on that team, but I think their defense flies around really well. They're opportunistic. They make some absolutely massive plays. I like Linden to get the job done here. I think they're just getting rolling now.
All right, next one in 2A, Ridgefield at Washougal Greater St. Helens League matchup. Couple good Greater St. Helens League matchups this week here. And last year, Washougal got a virtual walk-off touchdown via interception return to break a 27-27 tie at Ridgefield. And at that point, Ridgefield was the defending league champions and a quarterfinal appearance team from the year prior. Washougal kind of had a coming out party last year against Ridgefield, and after how they played last week on the offensive side of the ball, I've got a really difficult time thinking that Washougal is going to lose another game in league play. I think that the game against Woodland was more stylistically a problem for them, and also a great coaching job by Sean McDonald. So I think Washougal wins this one by a couple scores.
All right, well, I'm going to finally go different than you. Finally, we were on the same page too much. I bought so much stock in Braid Malella after that week 1 win over WF West. I think the Spudders are just a team that if you overlook them even just a tiny bit, I'm not saying Washougal is, but they are going to make you pay in a big way. I love what I saw from the Spudders in that win over WF West, although I think WF West is in a down year. Malella is just so smart with that football. He avoids turning it over. This is my favorite quarterback matchup in the state this week. I absolutely love Malella against B. I think you're going to see high level quarterback play, but I'm going to go ahead and take Ridgefield to pull off the road upset here.
Good pick. I'm interested to see how it works out because as you probably saw in week 1, I mean, it was nice to see Malella work his way back because he won the starting job as a sophomore against Logan de Beaumont and then ended up breaking his collarbone. And then it was de Beaumont who stepped in and, really kept the wheels on the road, so to speak, for Ridgefield. And he kind of just didn't allow Malella really a chance to win the job last season. But, based on how things ended up going for Ridgefield and them getting the 4 seed, I think that head coach Scott Rice was just a little bit more open to letting Malella have a real competition again of winning the job back. So it's a real great bounce back story to see Malella there, after having his collarbone fixed. And I mean, they got a good inside run game with Ridgefield. They like that shotgun zone and they can control the clock. They have a recipe that is going to be tough for Washougal to get the ball back. I think that playing at Washougal is the best thing for the Panthers in this one. And Tyson's also going with Washougal in that one. So, all right, staying in Greater St. Helens League 2A. Excuse me, soccer voice. All right. Mark Moore's at Hudson's Bay. Matt, I'm going to let you go first. You tell me what you think in this one.
Oh man, I believe in Mark Morris. I think them more than a lot of people really do so far this season. When you look at the results, they haven't really been there for the Monarchs here in the 2023 season. At some point, I think they're going to have their breakout party, that big victory that kind of wakes everyone back up to, hey, this is a pretty solid team. Maybe it's not a team that's going to go out and win the GSHL, but I think it's a solid team. That 21-3 win over Columbia River looks much better now, looking back at it, seeing what Columbia River just did against Woodland. So I think that's a solid win. Hudson's Bay beating Ridgefield last week was just such a stunner. I think that the high for Hudson's Bay might be a little too high. I think Mark Morris goes on the road. I'm an upset picker in the GSHL this week. I think the Monarchs get a really, really big win. If Hudson's Bay proves me wrong this week, they got me. They got me. I'm putting my hand up. I'll own it. But I think the Monarchs get the job done. I think the rushing attack is just so good. I think they take care of business this week.
Matt, this game is going to be played in a phone booth. Both of these teams are going to pack the line of scrimmage and run. Mark Morris ran for 323 in the loss against Washougal. If they didn't have to play against a guy named Holden B and a bunch of really talented wideouts, they would have figured out a way to win the football game against just about every team in the state of Washington, maybe except for 8 or 9 teams. Realistically, when you put together that type of a rushing performance, and when you have a win like Hudson's Bay did, and it's such a big win, like you want to assume that there's going to be a slight mental letdown, right? In terms of how good you are and how good you think you are, and we just beat this team, and Washougal just beat this team by this much, Mark Morris has the formula to control the ball. The key to this game is who gets out to a lead first. If Mark Morris gets out to a lead, I think that the way that the game plays out is that Mark Morris will be able to come up with bigger defensive plays, and they can control the clock. They've got a running back named Kenneth Mullen, who is a junior. This guy does not go down on first contact very often. Cade Warren is more than capable at the quarterback position. Last year, these two teams played. It was 50-13 Mark Morris. Hudson's Bay has got a Mark Morris problem this week. I think the Monarchs pop the bubble on the road. I'm picking the Monarchs to get this one done. Tyson's going Hudson's Bay, so he's different from us too on this one. I thought I'd be the only one going Mark Morris on this one.
I'm sorry I had to steal that thunder from you. That's my apologies, but
that's okay.
I think Mark Morris is just so good at running the football.
They certainly are, and if they had Dawson Morrow healthy this year, then they would be a much better team. And it's a shame that he's gonna miss his senior year for football, but getting ready for basketball and baseball this year, and he's got a good future coming up in baseball. So, but I still think Mark Morris has enough. I want to give a quick shout out though. The coaching staff for Hudson's Bay has done a phenomenal job turning that program around, and I would not be shocked if they win the game. I think I'm going out on a little bit of a limb here picking the Monarchs, but I think that realistically you could also be looking at Hudson's Bay as a 5-0 team, which is very impressive considering the turnaround in such a short amount of time with Mark Olivero and company. So next on the docket, your stomping grounds, Matt. Tumwater at WF West. Hey, the good news for the Bearcats is it's at home. The bad news for the Bearcats is it's at home, and all their home fans are going to see it live. Tumwater is really, really good this year. Last year, you wouldn't have known that because WF West finally broke the streak, 28-7 win over the T-Birds. Do they have what it takes, WF West, to look at the film from last year and re-believe in themselves and refocus themselves and pull off the upset here?
In one simple word, no, they don't. The defensive pieces are just so eye-openingly different than what they were last year. Now, WF West is young. They got a year to get these guys ready to make a run next year. But Tumwater, I didn't see them reloading like this. I didn't see them coming out and just running over everybody. That North Kitsap win, the score was close. North Kitsap was in it, but Tumwater, man, they've just dominated everyone. I think they dominate again this week. They don't care if they're playing on the road. Tumwater came into my senior night in football and just absolutely mopped the floor with us. So I think the T-Birds take care of business. I think that they have bought into the new coaching staff. They've bought into the new philosophy. Everyone's sold when it comes to Tumwater football. They look really, really good. I think they roll in this one. I really, really do.
I got Tumwater as well, and I think it could get out of hand quickly, unfortunately, for WF West. And you ask yourself if they have the firepower to even potentially come back if they do dig themselves a 21-0 hole. And I just don't see it anywhere at this point. The cohesiveness of this year versus last year is totally night and day, and that's not a knock at all about Brumfield at quarterback. So it's just a matter of having the right system in place for him to be successful, and having a team in front of you that's not named Tumwater helps as well. So
yeah, and losing Daniel Matagi, I still think, and William Buzzard, massive loss. Daniel Matagi won a state title in wrestling, and he spent less than a minute wrestling in that weekend. It was unbelievable, that performance. So having to replace guys like that against a team that's just going to run the ball right at you, it's a lot to ask for the new guys.
Clean sweep on Tumwater. Tyson's also on that train. Here's a good one. Napavine at Linden Christian. It feels like Napavine hasn't lost a game since the state championship game against Kalama, because they haven't. Linden Christian lost a game last week. So obviously I'm going to pick the team that lost last week. I think that Linden Christian is going to be a little bit different of an animal for Napavine to play this year. And I think that when Napavine gets into a game and they realize that they're in a dogfight, I wonder if their non-amount of recent experience is going to kick in. They did get a little bit of a test earlier this season against Onalaska for a good quarter and a half or so. Yeah, obviously they remember their Napavine and they're able to win. But on the road against Linden Christian, long bus trip, hostile territory, I think that it's a good time for Napavine to get a loss and focus up. So I'm going to LC in this one.
I have the win streak continuing for Napavine. The reason is, even when they get into a close game, Napavine can air it out. They can get right back into the game quick. They know how to score quick. An X factor, Carson Denault returning punts for Napavine. I think might be the best punt returner in the state. This kid, every time he touches the ball, it feels like he's going to be gone. Demarest is special with the football. And again, they have everyone back, all those playmakers back from last year. It's just so hard to pick against a team that just you can't remember lose. I mean, I was on the call for their last loss in that game against Kalama, and honestly, it's a game where they probably should have pulled out the win. I think Josh Fay is going to have those boys ready to play. The program he has built there is so special. I think Napavine gets the job done and kind of opens the eyes to the people who don't really care about 2B football this week.
Well, they're playing for the 2B Nation, that is for sure. Napavine is the pick by Tyson as well, so you guys are teaming up on me here. I just need to make up a game, and I picked Linden Christian to win the state championship. I'm gonna ride that until the freaking wheels fall off, Matt. I don't care. Man, we just got more bangers, man. The next one
for real,
Cedro Woolley at Anacortes. Man, it doesn't get much tougher for Cedro Woolley losing a game at home by 1 on a 2-point conversion with no time on the clock against Linden. And then you got to turn around and you got to take a trip to Anacortes against a team that's got, 2 spectacular Swiss Army knives in Brock and Brady Beaner, Rex Larson at quarterback. Their offensive line won the line competition at one of the major invites over the summer. I think that if Anacortes is able to consistently attack on the ground and utilize the Beaner twins, I think Anacortes wins this one, but this is very, very difficult for me to pick here, Matt, because I think that Cedro is in absolute desperation mode, and I feel like that they're going to use the game from last week as a building block of saying to themselves, we just let a game slip away against the defending champions. We can beat anybody. This one's really tough for me. ultimately, I'm choosing the home team in this one only because the game's at home. Anacortes won last year 42-20 against virtually the same lineup, minus Hayden John and a few other players from Anacortes. Cedro had, just as much, if not a couple more guys back. I think Anacortes still has enough in the tank to get this one done.
All right, well, I'm going to disagree with you on this one as well. I think Cedro Woolley bounces back. Like you said, that loss last week can either make or break a team. It's going to do one or the other. We're going to learn this week because another loss for Cedro Woolley, and things could get out of hand rather quickly. So this is a game they absolutely have to win, and I think they get the job done. Again, playing Linden that tight was big, but if you go back the week before, how they took care of business against Seahome, that was a very, very impressive win. Anacortes, I love the Seahawks. I love the story from last season. Haven't allowed a point in their last 2 games. I like the battle-tested version of Cedro Woolley over Anacortes, who has, no offense to these other teams, kind of not played too tough of a schedule yet. So I think the Cubs are going to come in again with those battle scars. I think they're going to take care of business and get that season-altering win for them.
Nice. Tyson's going Anacortes in this one. Let's move on down to 2B Toledo at Onalaska. More bangers, man. Tough games to pick here. Last year, it was 38-12 Toledo. Everything in my, fiber of my being says the Riverhawks are going to get this one done. But, man, I tell you what, after looking at Onalaska's offensive output so far this season, throw in the fact that they've already played Napavine and they have, seen the best 2B school in the area, I'm going with the Loggers in this one. I think that they give the first L of Toledo's season to the Riverhawks in a close one, real close one. Ethan Carver's a great running back for Toledo, so, it's going to be a close game.
This one is going to be something else. I got to call last year's game. This year's Onalaska team is much different. I think they're a much better squad all around. Rumor is they might mix in some pass plays this season, so we'll see what happens. Our good buddy Luke Kilgore is going to be on the call for this one, so keep your eyes peeled for that one. I'm going to go ahead and go with Toledo to get the job done here. I think this feels like their year. I think their defensive line is much underrated. I think they're better than anything besides Napavine that Onalaska has faced this season. So I think it's going to be, you kind of talked about with Mark Morris and Hudson's Bay, whoever gets that early lead and makes the other team have to make up ground, I think that's going to be the difference in this one. So I think Toledo gets off to that little bit of a better start and knocks off the Loggers. Very, very close ball game, though.
Another real close one to call, man. Northwest Christian Colbert at Lynn Ritzville Sprague, both teams undefeated 4-0. Ranked, 2 teams ranked in the top 5 in most every poll or ranking that you're going to see, minus RPI. Last year it was 35-7 Lynn Ritzville Sprague. I see no reason to go against Boness and company here in this one. I think Lynn Ritzville Sprague is probably the 3rd best team for sure in 2B. I think they solidify that with the win this week. And I think Northwest Christian still has a very, very good team. And regardless of the result in this one, neither team should feel like that, their season is anywhere over. So I think this is a great matchup. I think this is a better opportunity for Northwest Christian than it is for Lynn Ritzville. I think more pressure is going to be on Lynn Ritzville in this one. It could go different if Northwest Christian comes out and hits a score early to build that confidence and get some momentum going. But ultimately, I think that Brody Boness is the best athlete on the field. So I'm going to go with the best athlete and Lynn Ritzville Sprague.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm going to go with Lynn Ritzville Sprague, Washtenaw Herring. That's the last time I'm going to throw them all in because it's a tongue twister. But you're 100% right. More pressure is on them to get this job done. Not only are they the higher ranked team right now, they're playing at home. They have to get the job done. I think this is a team that could give Okanagan a run for their money and sneak into a state championship game. I really do. If the bracket works out and they get to take on the Bulldogs in a semifinal matchup, I think that they get the job done. I think this is a team built for that cold weather. I like Lynn Ritzville Sprague to get a big win in this one. Just build that momentum into the playoffs.
100%. North Kitsap at Bainbridge, crossover, sushi, espresso, Vikings. North Kitsap's 3-1, Bainbridge 4-0, despite the difference in classification, which I learned thanks to Yelm assistant coach Brian Irion. Yeah, I thought Bainbridge was playing a two-way schedule this year. I didn't know what their method was of potentially getting into the postseason, but nevertheless, I think they're dealt their first loss this week, even at home on the special expensive island. I'm going North Kitsap in this one. They won last year 58-zip, so yeah, wow.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think the Vikings are just another level. This team is one that, again, played Tumwater closer than that final score showed. I think the Vikings are kind of get a little disrespected because people are just looking at that final score a little bit. I think North Kitsap takes care of business here. And they're, again, another team we talked about them. They're a little bit of a mystery right now. But one thing I do know for certain is that they are a very strong football team. I think they get the job done on the road.
Two more, Matt, and Afreda at Kashmir, the first of those two. You know, Afreda is the only team that we're, really discussing here that's got a winning record that has a lower amount of points allowed, a higher amount of points allowed than points scored. So they've only scored 86 so far this season while allowing 111, and they're 3-1. Mainly that's because they got absolutely killed by Moses Lake in week 1, 58-3. So, I mean, have they made up, some of those 55 points? Yes, they're plus 30 over the last 3 games. To me, that doesn't really move the needle a lot, though. I mean, when you're talking about a team in Kashmir that, had a decent run last year into the quarterfinals, 4-0 already this season. They got a win last year against an Afreda team that, nearly pulled off a victory in week 1, against WF West in the postseason. I should say week 1, round of 16, excuse me. But yeah, I mean, I think that, if you look at the combination of last year's version of Afreda, last year's version of Kashmir, and then what you've seen so far from Kashmir, I see no reason why Kashmir doesn't Led Zeppelin on, baby. Let's go. Although it's spelt differently.
Yeah, sorry about that, Nick. I kind of dropped audio there, so I was trying to get back as soon as I could. My AirPods are dead, so we're just going with the old laptop speaker now. So
we've outlasted the AirPods.
Exactly, we beat Apple.
I went with Kashmir.
I didn't want to know who you picked. I wanted to go. I'm going Afreda, though. I think that they are kind of on a revenge tour-ish. I think that they felt like they got embarrassed because they did against Moses Lake. I think this is a very close game. Again, it's a coin flip, really, for me. But I'm going to go ahead and take Afreda to get the job done on the road and just continue to build momentum back up in their favor.
By the way, worth mentioning, if I didn't already, Tyson went with Toledo and Lindritzfield Sprague, and he's picking Bainbridge over North Kitsap. So we'll see. Love the guts, though, Tyson.
I like the bold call there. I do appreciate that. I respect it.
All right, last game on the docket. It's a close one. It's a one of those games that doesn't look too sexy when you look at the schedule here, Matt. But you've got some experience calling games for these teams. Gig Harbor at Timberline. Both teams 3-1. Timberline's only allowed 44 points so far this season. The defense is getting it done. Last year, Timberline got it done 38-36 over the Tides. Roll Tides, baby. I actually am going with Timberline in this one here. I just threw that in there as a Stephen A. Smith reference, but ultimately, I think the Timberline's defense wins out in this one here. I know that you've seen a little bit of Gig Harbor already this season. I'm not sure if you got a chance to get in front of Timberline, but I mean, they got some guys with some really good measurables on the defensive line, like a Daryl Gibson, 6'4", 220, a Ty Evans, 270, pounder on the defensive line. So, I mean, just looking at what they've got on the roster there listed, I think that And then look at how they played against Kelso, and only allowed 3 points this year. Anybody who beats my Highlanders, I got to take really seriously. So, that's why you got Camus and Tom Water and Timberline as very good teams. So, yeah, we're going with Timberline in this one. You're muted.
Jeez, I forgot to unmute. That's my bad. So, like I was saying, the amount of quarterbacks that Gig Harbor has had to play with this season is unfortunate due to injuries. Of course, there's that scary incident in the fishbowl. Benji Parks, I think, is the best quarterback I've seen. I've seen all three of them play now, and he looks like exactly what you'd want from a quarterback. So I think there's a quarterback decision to make there. I think Daryl Gibson, I'm glad you talked about him. He is a super athlete. If he can get going, this team's very, very solid. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to ride your coattails. I'm going to take Timberline as well. That big win back in week 1 over Kelso. Kelso's not that bad of a team. We just saw them really play Camus really, really tough. So I think Kelso's kind of built their way back into being a respectable win right now. So that win by Timberline looks really good to me. So I'm going to go ahead and take the Blazers to get a kind of a league-defining win, kind of set themselves apart as the number 2 team in that league.
Tyson is going Cashmere in the previous game between Afraid and Cashmere, and he's going with Gig Harbor. The Harbor. Yeah, you mentioned the Blazers there at the end, Matt. For those who don't know, which if you don't, you need to be following Matt on X. He's a huge Milwaukee Buck fan. Big day for the Bucks. Fear the deer.
Yeah. I wore this before any news broke. I was out the door this morning, and actually Nick broke the news to me. I was driving down to Longview, and I got the text that Dame was going to Milwaukee. I made a joke about it a couple weeks ago. I didn't think it was going to happen, but I'm stoked. It is terrible to see Drew Holiday leaving. I love Drew. So Portland, however long they have him, better take care of Drew.
Yeah, I'm actually probably in the minority here on this one, Matt, but I see use for Drew Holiday. I don't know why Portland would be so interested in moving on from him right away. I mean, he's probably one of the top 5 defensive point guards in the league. And just look at what he did against Dame, I think 4 years ago against the Pelicans, and helped the Pelicans sweep the Blazers in a season where I thought the Blazers were, they were the 3 seed, I think, entering the playoffs that year. So, I mean, I think the Bucks are definitely favorites to win the East. I would say that. Favorites to win the whole thing. I'm not quite ready to say that they're better than the Nuggets. I think that Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray, when healthy, and then you throw in a healthy Michael Porter Jr. into the equation, I think the Bucks are still a game worse. I think it goes 7 maybe. I think the Nuggets would win in 7, depending on who has home court advantage. That's the one area where the Bucks might actually end up getting it, though. It's because I think the Eastern Conference isn't quite as good, and I think that the Bucks should be able to go through it. But I mean, I got to give the Trailblazers organization a lot of credit here. I mean, yes, they did trade away their best asset, probably of all time, but they did manage to get away from the Miami Heat demands, of which the Heat just really didn't have an attractive package that they could send back to Portland. So I mean, I'm happy that they not only did they unload Dame, they also unloaded Yusuf Nurkic, who's been useless the last couple of years just due to injury. And I think DeAndre Ayton needed a change of scenery. He's been in Arizona basically his entire life, played at the University of Arizona, and, gets drafted for Phoenix, former number 1 pick. I'd like to see the Blazers keep Drew Holiday, but I mean, if you can flip him for somebody who's serviceable, who can come in and play the wing, that would be nice, because they definitely need some wing players. But yeah, I mean, I'm happy for you, happy for the Bucks. I know that you guys are getting a new coach, now this year, so it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But I mean, have Giannis and have Dame right away. Do they have enough pieces though on the side? They still got Chris Middleton, which is nice. I think it's a pretty good big three. That's for sure.
I think you also can't overlook Brook Lopez. I mean, what that guy does on the
Sure.
defensive end of the court, especially, my goodness. And then he shouldn't shoot as many threes as he does, but he does, and he makes more of them than you think. I question the Bucks' ability to stay healthy, though. We've seen Chris Middleton deal with some injuries. Giannis got hurt a couple years ago before they made that run and ended up winning the finals, and Dame's missed some time. So, I mean, health is a big role for both teams. I love Murray for the Nuggets. He's one of my favorite players away from Milwaukee to watch play. Boston still scares me though. Boston just gets in your face. Miami, I still think is a bad matchup, but I think the Bucks definitely got better. I put money on them to win the Eastern Conference. They finally have a shooter that can go out there and shoot lights out, put up 40, 50 points, and make life a lot easier on Giannis in the paint. So them making that run to the finals, I think would be a lot of fun to finally see Giannis and Jokic meet up in the NBA Finals. That's a great matchup.
That's yeah. I mean, that's a super matchup, and I think the Nuggets are good enough to get back there. I mean, I don't know if it's crazy for me to say this, but I think the Nuggets are like, considerably better than the next best team in the West. I don't even know who you look at in the West and you're like, yeah, this is a team that can definitely challenge Denver. I mean, I don't know who you're looking at and feeling super confident in. I mean, I don't
If
know.
I
The
had to
Suns,
pick,
maybe.
if I had to pick a number 2 team, it'd be the Suns. But I think you're right. It's a distant 2, especially now that the Nuggets have gone on that run and won. I always had a tough time picking the Nuggets, like I still do. The Grizzlies, especially the Ja Morant fiasco. If he was a little bit more composed, I think the Grizzlies would be in a great spot. But man, there's just so much drama and controversy around them. I think the Eastern Conference is definitely more up in the air, I'd say, with Boston and Miami being right there. I think the Bucks have separated themselves, and I think the Nuggets have separated themselves, and I just don't see any way that those two don't meet as long as both teams stay healthy.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds kind of crazy that we're just throwing away the Warriors right now and not even giving them like a realistic shot. But I mean, ultimately, I think that's the effect of the style of basketball that Denver plays with Jokic pretty much touching the ball on every possession and, seeing the floor so well. And, he has the ability to get an easy shot on just about every time he gets up down the court or he finds an easy shot for somebody else. And, they got guys that can run out in transition and, their defense is above average. I mean, they got a lot of boxes to check. I mean, I don't want to say that the Warriors are just outright done, but I mean, one-on-one, I don't feel super confident with Draymond taking on Jokic every night in the series. I mean, I know that they don't really like that matchup very much. I know that they like to have their other center kind of slide over into that role there. But, yeah, I mean, Steve Kerr's still a good coach. I mean, I think the Warriors are still a good team. And Clippers, I'm amazed that the Clippers, have underperformed like they have with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George on the same roster.
Yeah, it's a joke. You said you didn't feel confident about Draymond Green against Jokic. I feel confident that Jokic dominates that matchup every single time. I think he's too good. I think, man, picking the best player in the NBA, it's tough right now to go against Jokic with the things he's done. He's a monster. He's a one of one. Dude's just a special talent. Yeah, as long as you can get him decent supporting cast, the Nuggets going to be tough to beat.
Yep. Well, there's your basketball season preview for the NBA, brought to you by N2 Media and Matthew King of your ESN. Be sure to subscribe to our NBA page here in the very near future. Matt, what do you got going on tomorrow, aside from the football games that you did on Friday? Got any volleyball or soccer going on?
I'm going to admit something. I'm taking tomorrow off from broadcasting. My Packers play a pretty big Thursday night game against the Detroit Lions. So I'm just going to double dip on football. But I was able to call some volleyball last night, call some Central 2B, Adna and Napavine, which was an absolute blast. Adna hasn't lost a set yet this season. And I'm looking forward to getting out to get some soccer. I'm going to be able to catch Puyallup. I'm going to be able to see Sumner and Curtis coming up. So I'm going to really start dipping my toes in to the soccer pool again. I like waiting and kind of seeing where everything falls. I did see your RA Long Lumberjills down there come in and just beat WF West pretty handily. RA Long looked really, really good. I thought that they might have lost a little too much talent from last year, but no, they proved me wrong. They are so talented across the board. So, yeah, there's plenty of soccer and volleyball coming up that I'm going to be able to take attendance in and be able to watch. I love especially 2B volleyball. I'm disappointed that Jenny O'Neill from Kalama stepped down. That was my home away from home in COVID. Got to watch them play a lot. I'm really stoked to see Kalama also play soccer. I love Josie Brandenburg. She's a stud. She might be the best soccer player I've seen in the state. So I'm going to be able to get down there and see the Chinooks play as well. So lots of great stuff coming up here in just a couple weeks.
You know who's got two thumbs and put together a highlight video for Josie Brandenburg?
I'm guessing it's Nick Sisson. Yeah.
This guy.
Hey, I was able to give her a birthday shout out on air. Her mom, awesome. She's so nice to talk to. She's so fun. Was able to, I showed up and she was hanging up balloons right before a district semifinal match. So we were able to get her a birthday shout out. She's a special player and a great talent. Glad to see her sticking around and playing with her high school team one last go around.
Yeah, no, Josie's mom is great. I used to work at Safeway of my first job 20-something years ago, and she was a younger, student out of college, was working there at the time, and yeah, she reached out to me because my dad worked there also, and she was like, "Yeah, did your dad used to work at Safeway? I think I knew him and stuff." I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely." I was like, "Matter of fact, even I worked there when you were there." She's like, "Oh yeah, well, I have some highlights of my daughter and I got a chance to dissect it." And you're absolutely right. She's a really good soccer player. And all of the footage I saw of her was the club side of it. Didn't need to see any of the Kalama side of it in the high school and stuff. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of really good soccer players down here in the area. I mean, obviously you mentioned Ari Long and Catherine Chapin, and man, I'll tell you what, though, Ridgefield has got a really, really good team. I mean, they played Ari Long in the first league game and beat them 4-1. Here in Longview, and they were missing two of their top players in that match. So I mean, I think Ridgefield might actually be on the trajectory to win the Greater St. Helens League this year, barring Columbia River or RA Long potentially. Those are your top three. But yeah, big one tomorrow night for me, man. Columbia River comes to town and takes on the Lumberjills at Longview Memorial. RA Long got their first program victory ever last year over Columbia River, who is the defending state champions. So a huge win for them to get going. And so I'll be there tomorrow night doing that game for free. Come on and watch it and stuff. So yeah, I was trying to plug you for a game you were streaming tomorrow, but I mean, I can do it for Friday, between.
I'll be watching the Packers probably lose to Detroit. I hope I'm wrong, but I would not pick Green Bay to win that one, but I think they have a shot. Jordan Love has looked solid so far. Can't really complain with what I've seen from him, but I also will be miserable because the Mariners play the Rangers and will probably lose and likely be mathematically eliminated. Not that it matters.
Is it a 4-game series?
Yeah, it's a 4-game series. Not that it matters. The Atlanta Braves are going to run right through everyone to win the World Series. I hate to be a spoiler, but they're way better than everybody. I don't even think it's close.
Sure. Well, cool, buddy. Well, you've gotten your first taste of a 3.5-hour nonstop, no commercial podcast where you're leaving it saying, did I say enough? Did I say too much? Well, you probably did a little bit of both. So I really appreciate you coming on because, yeah, I mean, obviously, you're one of the hardest working guys in the state of Washington for high school sports. So love to get you introduced to the guys here, or everybody watching at home and stuff, and everyone will have a chance to rewatch it. And again, Matthew King of Your ESN, be sure to check him out on X, the artist formerly known as Twitter. But
I still haven't called it X yet. It's rough.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, appreciate you coming on, man. It means a lot, and I look forward to having you more later on if you want to jump on. Not everybody has 3.5 hours that they can spare once a week in the evening time, especially when they stream high school sports a lot of the time. But I appreciate you making time for us. Hope you had fun, and I hope you're able to tolerate me for 3.5 consecutive hours again.
Oh, Nick, if I did it once, I'm sure I can go ahead and fight through it one more time. But now I hope to come back on. A lot going on. So anytime you shoot me the invite, I'll give you an honest answer. If I can, I'll definitely be there. So I appreciate the offer, and hopefully it's not just you and I next time. Huh?
Yeah, no, absolutely. We'd love to have a trio. That's what we're. Do you remember the last time that we were together though? When what last event and what we were talking about?
I mean, do you want to talk about the last time in person? Because we also had a little bit of a podcast where you hopped on and talked UFC
Yeah,
on
no,
my
in
podcast.
person. In person.
So that would have been, if I remember right, it would have been at the rodeo.
The baseball game though too. I was thinking like in terms of professional, but yes, we did bump into each other at the
Okay.
rodeo, out of chance. But no, we were talking about Tumwater missing out on a third straight district championship, but they're probably going to go and win the state championship.
Yep.
And lo and behold, that's what happened. Crazy.
Yeah. Yep. No, they went out there and they played really well against Linden. They stopped Linden from winning the three big sports state championships on a walk off by Braden Orem. It was a really fun game. I was on the call for that one, and man, that was a chaotic day from the ending of WF West, their game with Sela all the way into that one, and watching Clahalia as well win a state title. That was very cool to see. Clahalia will probably win another one. There's my early baseball preview for you. So it'll be interesting to see where the 2A baseball landscape lands this season.
Yeah. Well, I picked up your hat energy early in the show, went backwards. So, here we are.
Hey, I was just trying to not mock Blazer fans. I know they're hurting today. I didn't want to be wearing the Bucks hat. So.
No. I don't know if you saw, but I already posted a meme where, Dame's like, I want to win a title and go to a big market. And it's the Pawn Stars guy says, best I could do is Milwaukee.
Hey, at least he's got a chance to win. Yeah, not a big market. Hopefully they lock
that's
in
the point.
Yeah.
There's a negotiation there. You can have a chance to win a title, but it ain't South Beach.
Yeah, no, Miami got a little too cocky thinking that he wanted to go there, so they didn't have to offer much. But guess what? Portland, hats off to them. They weren't playing ball that way.
All right, buddy. Well, enjoy the Packers and Lions game tomorrow. Enjoy the call on Friday and Saturday this week with it's a Raymond South Bend and
Forks.
Gosh, I have it written. No, we couldn't do the game. Forks. So that'll be a good one. And then Battleground and Mount Tahoma. So enjoy those games, and I'll catch up with you. I got RA Long and Columbia River on Friday, so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, see if there's been a lot of upsets, so you can't write off the Lumberjacks.
No, of course not. Absolutely. But all right, buddy, have a good night. And I'm just going to end the stream here real quick, and we'll catch up here. All right. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you watching.